that everyone, we've not really done that, we can hear online. But points of reference, obviously, as we go through the agenda, there are a number of agenda papers, but just to draw your attention, there are some supplementaries that were added due to late submission of papers, etc. So they're online. If when we ask questions specific to papers, if we can make reference to the page number that we're talking about, so that people in the room and everyone can keep an eye on the published agenda and the supplementaries attached to that. As always, please welcome people to participate. If you could indicate at the earliest opportunity so that I can have a list of names for questions, etc., or comments. The meeting's been audio recorded, and there are no fire alarm planned for today. We had those earlier, so if the alarm does go off, please leave the building in an orderly fashion and follow our colleagues from Democratic Services. Thank you for that. Okay, item 1 of our agenda is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. We have received apologies from Councillor Clayton and Councillor Hendry. We've also received apologies from 2 of our co-opted members, the Reverend Toby Osman and Sławek Naukiewicz.
Thank you for that. Are there any other apologies, members, that we are aware of? Okay, that's fine. So just to say out loud, can I please remind all members across all groups that we have the ability to sub into these meetings? So if for any reason you find yourself not able to attend, the ability for you to offer a substitute to come along to these meetings is there for us. And that's the idea is that so that we can get as many members around the table as possible to be able to contribute to the agenda items that we have. Thank you. Item number 2 is declarations of interest. Members, are there any declarations of interest or comments? Councillor Snell.
On item agenda number 11, I work with students who use Somerset Transport.
Thank you. We'll note that it's not any conflicts there at all. Item 3 of our agenda is to note the minutes, to approve the minutes that were circulated. Any points of corrections or comments in relation to the minutes? Are you happy that we accept them? No and against, thank you. Item 4 of our agenda is public questions. Jamie, what did we decide we were going to do with the
Thank you, Chair. We received a public question from the Somerset Parent Care Forum, which relate to item 8, and they will be considered at that point in the meeting. And a response will be provided then. And the question that you raised will take as part of item 6.
Cool. Thank you. So just for clarity, for those online and members in the room, so following the executive last week, there was a question that was raised in relation to foster care funding for foster carers that was and I took that question and thought it would sit well with us, so I asked it as a public question. So we're going to take it. The reason I asked it formally is because it may be an item that the committee may wish to look at in a little bit more depth. So I'll ask that question later when we get to that point. And also, due to short notice, the Parent Carers Forum asked a question that only became apparent late on last week, and I used Chair's discretion to allow them both to be submitted because I think that they're both relevant to today's agenda. So we'll deal with those when we get to them. There are no other public questions, so we move on then. So item 5 of our agenda is the Children and Families Work Programme. Members, since the last meeting, there was likely to be an extraordinary meeting that then wasn't an extraordinary meeting, and then there's a couple of other issues. But we also agreed as a committee to try and sit down as a committee with senior leaders and officers from Children's Services to try and map out a work programme for us. The idea being that what I would call the must-have, the should-have, and the could-haves could be dealt with. That we can put a little bit of a framework around our agenda going forward, and that will mean some of the items there. But of course, we will also be looking to keep space for the unforeseen items to come forward. So the workshop's been set for later this month. the 28th of May. Is it all yeah, thank you. And yes, the 28th of May. Is in your calendars. I would appreciate that as many members as possible turn up. It will be a non-public event, so it's a workshop style, so that we can have conversations to drill down in some of the items. It would be good if members would confirm or decline the invite that's there, so that we can make sure that we know who's coming in, other than it's just me and the vice chair talking to officers. So members would be welcome. So yeah, again, if you could please respond to the meeting invite one way or another. And again, please go back to your groups and communicate the fact that we're having a workshop, because I know there are other members of council that have an interest in children's and family scrutiny. And again, all members will be welcome. And it would be a little bit, I can say it with confidence, I've not seen 110 members turn up to a meeting, a workshop like this, so we're there. But if you can acknowledge and pass the word, that would be really good, because I think it would be a good opportunity for us as members to have conversation with officers, so that we can actually map out a forward programme for us. Any other points or comments on our work programme? So the next meeting, as I say, has been, again, between the last meeting and this meeting, the meeting agenda has now been sent out. You would all, I'm sure, members in your inbox, be a little bit fed up now with meeting invites. However, it's important that we get the opportunity to do them. Just a little bit of, with my member development hat on, chair of the member development committee, should you wish to, if you press no to the meeting invite, it will disappear from your calendar, but you can tentatively respond to it. So if you're not sure just yet, they're a year in, if you just tentatively respond to it, it will stay in your calendar but disappear from your inbox. So that's a useful tech tip that we try to help as much as we can as we go forward. Okay, that's item 5 of our agenda. Item 6 of our agenda is the budget monitoring report for month 11. Christian, welcome back from, sorry, Councillor Cravis.
Actually, going to ask a question. Number 5, actually, just on the July meeting, because it looked what was in the July meeting was quite long, and I weigh that with the 3-hour time limit. We got enough time to get through it. Am I looking at the right bits?
In our forward work programme, you
Yeah,
mean? Which page are you looking at?
July 2025, page 26. Is it just the top 3? Is it?
Yeah. So the way that it's structured at the moment is it's just the top section. So the top 3 items are the current plan. But the honest answer, Marcus, is the fact that what we will see is after the workshop that will change, so that we're able to then go through it. What I asked our clerk if we could have as many items that we've got going. And just for reference, I have quite a long list of things that we said that we would like to talk about, which I'll bring to the workshop. I've already I'm going to send an email in a bit to the senior leaders who will be putting the workshop together, to offer them the opportunity to have a conversation with myself and the vice chair to try and map out what the workshop will look like, so I have a better idea then going forward. But thank you for your question. Item 6 of our agenda, Christian, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Chris Evans, Head of Finance Business Partnering, and I've also got with me Joe Curry, Strategic Finance Business Partner. So Joe is just loading up the slides.
Coming now.
Technical issues. There we go. So this is the month 11 budget monitoring to the end of February. So on a budget of 442,788,000, there's currently a prediction of £4,090,000 overspend on that. However, that is £98,000 better off than it was in month 10. The movement, so the commissioning and performance of 101,000, that's due to further vacancy savings within the commissioning service and business support of 71,000, and a decrease in forecast expenditure for Connect Somerset of 30,000. The increase in movement for education and transport, so that's because of mainly due to reforecast of SEND transport income and some unforeseen maintenance costs on top of that as well. Moving on to the external placements for month 11. So the 24-25 external placements budget is near on 46 million. There were 357 active external placements. On the slide, it does say January. That does actually mean the end of February. And the current reported forecast overspend for external placements is 12.401 million. And that's mitigated by a contingency budget, which was set for 24-25 of 2.854 million. So the net overspend for external placements is 9.547 million. That is a decrease of 147,000 from month 10. Medium-term financial plan, I will come on to that in a second. There are some slides on that. So going down to a bit more of a breakdown. So the CLA, or children looked after numbers, as of the end of February, we're up to 640. That is an increase of 51 from the original budget in April. Further breakdown again, so residential and unregistered placements for month 11, you will see there on the left-hand graph, we did budget for an average of 73 residential placements. As of the end of February, we were up to considerably higher, 96. And then the unregistered placements, these tend to be the very expensive costs. As of the end of February, there was 6 active unregistered placements, and we did budget for an average of 1 for 24-25. All of these figures have been taken into consideration when we've set the 25-26 budget. So a lot of these forecasts have increased into the 25-26 budget. Moving on to education and transport forecast. So on a budget of 32.406 million, there is actually improvement of 932,000. An underspend predicted at month 11. At month 10, it was just over 1 million, so it is 70,000, just slightly worse off. So this is mainly due to Send Transport and relates to the reforecast of achievable income in Send Transport for the paid seats that we offer, and there's some unforeseen maintenance costs, additional costs that we've included in there. Moving on to the dedicated schools grant. So the deficit we did bring forward on the 1st of April was 33,911,000. You can see there's another increase for 24-25, an increase of 28,745,000. So the carry forward, we are predicting that month 11 is 62,656,000, which is obviously a considerable amount, as is with most unitaries and counties. On the right-hand side, Joe has kindly broken down the high needs block, as you can see there, which is the significant overspend, and the majority of the overspend is in mainstream schools. The forecast outturn is £19.846 million overspend for 24-25. So there continues to be a significant pressure on costs within the high needs block, as we can see there from the tables. The decrease in forecast in independent non-maintained schools, INMS, and post-16 are following a review of committed expenditure and relate to children that have not started placements on agreed dates in 24-25. And there are reductions in the forecast for the advisory services and virtual schools. That's following a review of whether costs were in line with the high needs block grant conditions. The medium-term financial plan, so there is a balance of nearly 1.6 million, so 1.592 million. So it says unachievable, but they have been achieved for 24-25. However, that's just a temporary temporary cover, as it were, for that unbalance. There needs to be some work for the ongoing 25-26 onwards into the budget, because it's baked into the budget. So that needs to be something that needs to be worked on into 25-26. However, it has been covered for 24-25. And then finally, again, just you can see a graph there showing the dedicated schools grant. So that's the predictions there, the forecast deficit for 25-26. The school balances currently in surplus, the top red line. They are actually predicted to go into deficit within 26-27. And then also you can see the dedicated schools grant, the blue the blue line and obviously the dotted line plummeting effectively, and we're edging on towards 100 million for the 31st of March 2026, which is when the statutory override is due to end. So we are monitoring to see what the government's plan is on statutory overrides as of that point. There's a whistle-stop tour of finances for children and families, so happy to take any questions.
Okay, I'll start with my public question first in relation to the comment I made earlier. Just for clarity, the question was raised at executive, and I wanted to raise it here first. So I'm assuming Jane would probably respond. So the question was something along the lines: I understand that the fees and charges paid to our in-house foster carers changed recently, apparently in some cases reducing fees with no notice. Can I ask for some feedback on this issue and provide an explanation around the structure and potential plans for the future? Jane, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, just to say that we do clearly value all our foster carers and we are committed to supporting them, and this includes fair financial recompense. So the fees and allowances is reviewed on an annual basis and goes through a non-key decision to Councillor Shearer, and it followed the same process this year. The fees and allowance budget was increased by 3.55% this year. Last year, we had a 5% increase. The rate we pay for the first child in foster care has increased significantly this year. As previously, in what we wanted to make more equitable was for foster carers receive less for the first child than what they did for children 2, 3 or any more. And we felt that was unfair. And also what we know from our foster carer households is many new carers coming in want to just foster one child, and we didn't feel it was fair that they receive less money for one child than what they would if they'd have had per child for children 2 and 3. So what we have done this year is made the fee payment the same, what you get for child 1, child 2 and child 3. No carer is financially worse off this year than what they were last year. There was a significant increase for carers with 1 or 2 children because everyone received more for child 1. Carers with 3 children have had a modest increase of about 1 to 2%, depending on the specific circumstances of each child, because clearly we do pay more for some children with complex needs. For carers with more than 3 children, of which we currently have 4 in Somerset, we are providing a top-up payment, and we've spoken to them individually to ensure that they did receive at least the same amount as last year. So no carer in Somerset is receiving less money than what they were the previous year. We've met with the consultative group since the new structure started on the 1st of April to agree a comprehensive review of our fees and allowances. And this is alongside a much bigger piece of work that's happening in fostering around how we ensure our fostering service is responsive to carers and supporting them to support our children. We've got dates in for workshops over the coming few months, and there'll be a full report in the summer, hopefully early July, which can be shared with members if that's what you would like. So just to reiterate, really committed to our carers. Nobody is receiving less money than what they were. And actually what we've done is made it more equitable for those having one child compared to 2 and 3.
Thank you for the response. So at executive, there was some potential conflict there. There's at least one member gave an indication that wasn't correct. So thank you for the response. Rather than get caught up in it now, so just for clarity, you're saying that there's a review taking place and a paper will be available in July. And so the question would be, are you happy for us to put that on the agenda item for July's meeting so that we can then review that? Because I was going to ask that a paper be brought to the committee so that we can obviously scrutinise the detail. I welcome your response. So just for clarity, so rather than at the next meeting, it'd be better to bring it foster care charges and changes to the July meeting?
Chair, my only concern about that is because the report won't be ready to early July, whether we would meet the agenda deadline for it and whether we would be better doing it the following meeting.
I'm reasonably confident that we're talking the end of July or very early August.
I would suggest we very happy to bring an update too.
Jamie is magically just checking the calendar now. Okay, we'll confirm dates, but yes. Yeah, so I think it's so the meeting after due, so the July or August meeting, which is 11th of August. There you
Yes.
go.
Yes, very happy to
Got
bring.
30th of June
update.
for our next meeting,
Yes.
the 11th of August for the one after that. So we will agenda a foster care fees and charges report for that meeting. We'll clarify where it goes before. But does any member want to come in on that before I move on? Councillor Cravis.
Yeah, thank you. Just on that point, really, obviously the effect that fostering can have on the budget overall. I mean, we say August the 11th. I know we're talking in local authority terms, but that puts us, what's that? Where are we now? I know we're already in May. That suddenly seems quite a way away, and I think we should let all stops to try and talk about it, earlier, because obviously it can have an impact. You only need to lose a couple of foster carers, and obviously it's very interesting about the figures then going up, but obviously in real terms and what's going on generally with costs elsewhere, they're actually taking quite a significant cut, I would argue. But I'll leave that to the accountants to work it out properly.
Heather, would you like to come in? If you introduce yourself first, I don't know whether we've got any members of the public on, but they may be viewing it afterwards. So introduce yourself as well.
Of course, thank you. I always forget to do that. Yes, Councillor Heather Shearer. I'm the lead member for Children, Families and Education. And as the Chair pointed out, was involved obviously in the signing off of the annual uplift paper. Just want to say, Mark's absolutely agree, Councillor Cravis, I should say, absolutely agree with you that time is of the essence. However, the only watchword I'd say against that is, firstly, it has to be, whatever we do has to be properly consulted with our foster carers. And exactly as I think you just mentioned as you were signing off there, Marcus, it also needs to go through our financial colleagues to make sure that's also accurate. So whereas I would like it done tomorrow, I absolutely would. I wish it had been done yesterday, but I would just caution that I know it feels like LA time, but if we can bring it in quicker, we will. But I just wanted to make sure that we cannot scrimp on the consultation, because that would be a terrible criticism for us if we did.
Thank you for that response, and forgive me, but I'll just, my chair of this scrutiny committee, one would have hoped that a reasonable amount of consultation would have taken place before the decision was done and put into play.
Thank you. I don't wish to be pedantic, but they're two separate processes. One is the annual uplift, which was done quite quickly, I admit, because we got our budget late and we did what we could. We did as much as we could. We had spoken about the annual uplift to the consultative group, I think in January as well, and in previous workshops. But I grant you that could have been done better. I think the review, what I don't want to do about the review is let anybody in the fostering community, this fantastic group of fosterers, think that we've already worked out what we want in there. So yes, we wanted to start straight away in the new year, and we've started that. But I don't want to say it's a done deal and we know what we're giving.
Thank you for that. So just to Chair's prerogative. So I've asked the question. We've had a formal response from the service. That response will be shared with this committee, and then we will share that wider. What I will do is leave the door. So we'll go for the earliest opportunity a report will come, but what I will do is leave the door open, because I would be the first. I don't fully understand the intricacies of our fees and charges and the way that impacts our foster carers. We've already, as a council, made clear the priority to both gain, encourage, and support our foster carers, because for the amazing job that they do for us and the amazing savings. So, but I will leave the door open to any member that wants to write to me once the question is formalised to allow us to prioritise their responses so that we can get something back at the earliest opportunity. Evie.
Can I ask that includes a breakdown and clarification of the fostering plus, please? Because we've got quite a few foster carers, and that part of their recognition for their service and hard work, I think, has come into this. And so it's quite new. It happened quickly. As a foster carer, we weren't really informed of these things, which actually really, really saddens me. And that needs changing now, So I will bring this up every single time. So the fostering plus all fees and how we're looking after those that have really dedicated themselves to Somerset Council, please.
Yeah, sorry, just to come back on that point. Thank you. Yes, the purpose of the workshop is that wider discussion and consultation, which includes the fostering plus and how we work with carers across the board.
Okay, thank you. Members, no other comments on that? Right, move on. So, Christian, thank you for the presentation. It's always frustrating this time of year that we're getting month 11, even though the council has closed its budget and the covering points. But I'll take questions from members as they go. But I've got one myself. You talked about the savings and that were unachievable. I'm just picking up on some choices of words. You say in the slide that was shown about the savings, it says that unachievable, but then you've followed that by saying that it's achieved for 25-26, and I was a little bit confused by the choice of words. Could you clarify, please?
Yeah, so it's been achieved for 24-25, but those savings are baked into the budget, so they're taken off the budget, so they need to be a permanent saving. So we've only found a temporary saving, or the service have only found a temporary saving for 24-25. So they'll roll over into the following year. So there needs to be permanent savings. So that's why it's achieved in 24-25, but for 25-26 it's still in the budget, has been taken off. So we need to identify permanent savings for those. So that's the difference between the two. And as far as the close down is concerned, we haven't actually finished closing down the accounts yet. So that's why you haven't seen them yet. There is a report going to corporate resources in June. So and it'll follow into scrutiny after that for children and families. Sorry.
Okay, so forgive me then. So, and I'm just picking up on the conversations that were had in the comments previously. So, as I've said last month, and I think I said the month before, and I said the meeting before about savings and substitutes and achievability, the slide clearly showed that one of the proposed savings was unachievable. The question I'll ask of the service, not necessarily yourself, as it seems to be Jane or would need to come back, what substitutes, so what savings, where are we as far as the children's services with fill in that gap? So I'm assuming it was unachieved, that particular item of saving. What substitute?
Yeah, thank you. So the saving in question there is around the 16+, 16+ service, which, as everyone will recall from previous scrutinies, was put in place in April 2024. It took a bit longer for some of the children who are moving from one service to another to make that move, principally things like exams getting in the way and stuff like that. We hadn't modelled as well as we should have done for that move. So in effect, for that year, we achieved about half the savings that we're anticipating for the service, but the in-year savings are very close to the target that was set. I think the gap is around £300,000. We have £600,000, well, 1.2 million from transfer of to housing, of some services to housing, so that more than covers the remaining £300,000. So we're confident that we've got the right things in place around that service. We are still continuing to push hard. I think at some point, depending on the workshop, we'll bring an update around children looked after. There is a huge amount of work still going on about the flow and getting that right and making sure that young people are supported and they're able to move when they're ready onto housing, independent living, things like that. But that will all be part of that agenda item in the future.
Okay, thank you. So just to give the service warning, then one of the things that I'm looking forward to and I'll look at is obviously the end of year. Once it's finalised and brought forward, there was a number of overspends that were highlighted. One of the things that I'll be looking at is how we manage to balance the books, where when it came forward, and that needs to be something that I'm just pre-warning you that it's going to be something that I would look at. And obviously going forward, one of the things that I would hope that we're able to do is to any highlighted savings that we've got for this current financial year, 25-26. Again, will we in real terms, that's something that both the 151 officer and I have said what we've been needing to look at and to scrutinise to make sure that we're comfortable where we're going and it's not impacting children's services. in any negative way. So, members, are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any hands. So that's fine. So, Christian, thank you very much. You got off with that. Thank you for that. We move on then. Item 7 on our agenda is the JTI Action Plan update. I think, Jane, you're presenting this, and thank you. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, my apologies that the report was submitted late, this purely being due to the fact that the workshop was held on the 8th of May, and then the information needed to be collated and then put into the report. I'm also aware that whilst I'm presenting this report, there are colleagues on the call that have been invited from the partnership organisations. I can see Liz Hughes from the police and Maria Davis from health, and there may be others. So whilst I appreciate I'm presenting it, clearly as far as questions and comments that they may well want to come in there. So really the purpose of the report is twofold. One is to give the committee an update on where we are with the action plan, but it's also really to ask members to consider how you can further your understanding of the serious youth violence agenda in Somerset and opportunities there are to come out and shadow teams and spend time with us. We also last month presented you with an update with regards to the youth justice plan, and obviously there are clear links between that agenda and this one, so really to bear that in mind. So you will remember that it was a year ago now that we had the JTI inspection, which identified some serious concerns around the partnership's approach to serious youth violence in Somerset. And following that, we were tasked with putting an action plan together, which was developed and implemented. We've had various multi-agency workshops since, notably in October, January and in May. I'm not going to read through them because they have been seen before and shared on the report, but there were two key priorities and a number of recommendations, which when we met on the 8th of May, we updated and discussed as a group. So the key updates really around the action plan are as follows. There was a need to review the governance structure that was highlighted in the inspection, and I think agreed by the whole of the partnership, that how different groups related to each other and how we ensured that the right information about children was shared didn't quite work for us in Somerset. So there has been a complete review of that, new terms of reference and the pathways finalised. I've tried as far as possible not to put too many acronyms into reports, but I do appreciate when you start to look at the groups, they do all have quite strange names and everything, and hopefully as we go through it will become a bit clearer. What we do know as a partnership that we have a wide range of data that's available, and one of the key things we're working through is how do we use data in the right way that's helpful to us, because sometimes we can be so data rich that in itself becomes quite confusing and complicated. So we're really looking at how we use the right data in the right way. Another key area for us is around the training, and do all our staff and workers across the partnership have access to the right training, similar training, consistent training. So there is a revised training plan that's due to be completed by the end of May. We also spent quite a lot of time at the workshop in May talking about professional curiosity and how we encourage all professionals to be curious about a range of things. And actually, when we're looking at the agendas of serious youth violence and exploitation, that is a key part really. And how do we improve confidence in workers that they're able to be professionally curious, knowing what services are out there to offer that support. Another key area for us has been around education. We know that we've had a big drive in Somerset on reducing exclusions, and we've had some success at that and keeping children in school, but we still do remain an outlier in the country, and we know we need to do further work around that, particularly for our children with SEND, to account for 65% of all exclusions. So just turning to that revised governance structure, not to spend too long on it, but just to give you an overview. What we wanted to do was ensure that we had a pathway into services that happened at that operational, real on the ground level, where workers working with children could discuss those children, share information to ensure risks were identified. Then it's sort of next layer up with how we consider priorities, and then at that top level, that very strategic approach that feeds into how we're working together around serious youth violence. And you can see there that the kind of structure of the meetings means we have those weekly meetings. It's very much about that on the ground, being able to respond to the needs of children, professionals working together. Then up to that next level I was talking around, which is the fortnightly meetings, which is that much more around that community. How are we looking at antisocial behaviour? How does all that feed in? And then that kind of monthly meeting, it's very much around that more strategic approach. So that kind of goes through the kind of update where we are. A lot of work's gone into reviewing the structure and ensuring that works right for our professionals, which then inevitably means that's responding to our community's needs and the needs of our children. That's all that I was going to share on the report, but there may well be questions for various members of the partnership during the meeting.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for those joining us, for taking the time to come along today. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. I know members do around. Just the first, while I'm waiting for members to wave at me, so for questions, I'll start off. So first of all, just a bit of clarification, really, Jane. When you talked about opportunities for members to understand better how the partnership is working, I know when we spoke previously that was along the lines of members that may have some time available between in that are able to link up with yourself to then look at opportunities to go out and spend some time with other service or partners to understand the process a little bit better. Could you just clarify how members may want to do that?
Yeah, so I appreciate that Liz and Maria might well want to come in with regards to the police and health, but certainly from a children's services point of view, which includes both our social care teams that work with young people at risk and also our youth justice service, which you heard about last month. There are opportunities there to come along to team meetings, shadow workers, attend any sort of event to really understand, so you get a real sense of the kind of work that's going on and how we're responding to our children at risk.
Thank you. Maria, thank you. I was just about to say, Maria, Liz, did you obviously just to clarify, it's not something that we will force on any of our partners, but the opportunity for members to be able to spend some time would be really helpful, I think, in understanding better what's going on. Maria.
Hi, Maria Davis, designated nurse safeguarding children for Somerset ICB. Similar to what Jane was just saying in relation to coming along to team meetings, if they wanted to shadow individuals. And I suppose one thing I wanted to add to what Jane was just saying about data also links nicely with wanting to come along. Part of the conversation that we had at the workshop week before last was very much around we need to be evidencing the impact of all of the actions that we've undertaken in the last year in relation to serious youth violence and exploitation. And one of the desire for what evidence is there and how can we gather different methods of not just data, but different ways and means of actually gathering that evidence. The Safeguarding Children Partnership started in February, a rolling programme of insight visits, and Somerset NHS Foundation Trust was the first part of the partnership to be subject to that insight visit. I led the insight team, but actually there were members there from the business unit in the partnership as well as some children's social care colleagues. And it was a real good opportunity to go along and see both at the strategic lead level, at that senior lead level, and again at that frontline practitioner level, what changes had been made in relation to practice, knowledge, understanding, all of it, in relation to serious youth violence and child exploitation. And that was a really good experience for all parts of the insight team. So that's almost an example of how that's more in depth. Perhaps too in depth for counsellors, but certainly it was a really good way of identifying, gathering evidence. And one of the key themes that came out of the report was that clear progress had been made since the joint targeted area inspection in May. And it was a children's social care colleague who'd clearly picked out that there was triangulation of multiple themes in relation to serious youth violence and exploitation right through, which is what you want to see right through that organisation. It wasn't just the leads with saying one thing. It was when we then went out and actually spoke to practice staff in very busy emergency departments who were still open and willing to actually talk to us. It was really good to hear lots of examples about what serious youth violence and exploitation looked like in practice. And that gave us a really good source of material to evidence the impact of that action plan and the positive changes that have been made in the system. And I think I'll stop there.
And Maria, you rightly remind me subtly that I didn't ask for either of you if you wanted to continue with Jane's, add anything to Jane's report. I just realised that I was so set on the right questions at the right time that I forgot that. So Maria, thank you for interjecting. Liz, did you want to come in with anything to add to Jane's report?
No, I think Jane's characterised our progress well today. I was in the workshop with Jane and Maria on the 8th of May, and I think we really sort of drilled down to the key actions that we need to make progress with in the coming months, and also could reflect on the progress being made. Just in terms of the ability for councillors to come and work with the police, obviously similar to Jane and Maria, anyone would be welcome to come to any of our team meetings to gather further insight. And also for, in terms of more operational observation, we do offer a ride along scheme to go out with our patrol officers or our neighbourhood officers. So whilst you may not necessarily see specific youth violence work that day, you'll be able to chat to colleagues on the ground, but you also would get a feel for other services across Somerset. So if anyone wants to channel those inquiries through Jane, then I can make sure that that's facilitated. Amazing, thank you. Just to before I bring members in, so I've got Francis so far. Just one of the Maria alluded to it, but it's the data sharing. I'll ask all three of you directly. So, are we comfortable now that the data that's sharing that's needed is, I won't say perfect because that would never be the case, is getting better? And are we moving forward in a positive way for that? Jane, first.
Yes, so if you look at the way now the group, the way we meet and those meetings have been set up, it allows data to be shared with the right people at the right time, which I think is the key, that we're not getting lapses in information. So it's certainly improving. There's always more improvements we can make, and it may well further develop those groups and that pathways, but we're certainly in a very different place to where we were last year. Yeah, and you're both nodding. You're welcome to come in if you wanted to add anything to that, either of you. Yes, I'm just going to add, I think we talk about data sharing a lot and we talk about interagency communication. I think the data is definitely improving, but also what's improving is the culture and the behaviour around that data. So having the confidence to have that professional challenge and escalation, because data sharing is one thing, actually having conversations to make sure children get the right support and services as a professional group, holding ourselves to account as a partnership is really important as well. So I've seen real progress since we've started working, and I'm really confident that the meeting structure that's been put in place will ensure children with the right levels of risk to be discussed and have the right support from all of our partnership. Thank you. Maria?
I just wanted to add, I agree with everything that Jane and Liz have said. Just wanted to add that Somerset are also part of the Avon and Somerset Violence Reduction Partnership. And in terms of data sharing, we've recently signed off an information sharing agreement across all partners to ensure that when there are complex cases that are across border, that there is that mechanism in place to actually share information promptly in order to safeguard.
That's brilliant. That's really heartening news, because data was always the big one with single identifiers and being able to have different systems communicating with each other. So that's great. Thank you, Francis. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just please, can I volunteer now? Across all fields, it would be fascinating. It will be valuable from my understanding, and I'd really like to.
Thank you. That's noted. We'll find a way to link that together. So, Councillor Carswell, Simon. Simon, just pause for a second. your thing hasn't lit up, so I'm assuming it's just pairing. So there you go. You should try the other one for now, and then we'll. Yeah. Remember, it's just a bit of a technical thing. One of if you haven't done already, just press the go button on your and then it will start talk. If it's not already, it should be there now, Simon. I think it takes a while to pair. No. Damn it! Now it is. I heard you move, so that one should be up and now.
No. Brilliant. I think you heard me anyway, but I'll just say again, the acronyms are very good, apart from one which isn't explained, which is JTAI. And nowhere in the report does it say what it.
Jane?
Apologies, not good to have the title of the report, the only acronym. So it refers to the Joint Targeted Area Inspection, which happened last year. So apologies for that.
Thank you. Pauline, could you just knock that microphone off? That's just. Oh, still, no, forget that. Nick, Councillor O'Donnell, sorry.
Okay, am I on? Yeah. Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just.
Sorry, just said that I'm just conscious our colleagues online won't be able to hear because the microphone hasn't come on. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, that's right. I was just looking at point number 9. I think there's one point that has jumped out at myself, and the children with SEND accounting for 65% of overall exclusions. You know, I feel SEND children are already disadvantaged, and we seem to have an educational system that seems to be exacerbating that by reading point 9. It's a very simple question, but I doubt it's a simple answer. They say it's the schools not being able to manage it or having the right resources in place. What resources are they lacking?
That's probably.
That's a very short question with a very long answer. We do. Well, we do have an agenda item just to go into some depth about the overall transformation programme and to brief members on what is untrained and what is planned. So I suggest if we can hold that question, I would say from an exclusion point of view, that is something that is a very, very high priority for the council, but also for all of our partners. We have been at a very high level across the county. At one point, we were second and third respectively in the country for the level of exclusions. That has come down. It does look like it's peaked, but it is still, we would like it to be some of the lowest in the country, and we're an awful long way from that. So I think if maybe we can hold that question, if we can do the briefing and agenda item 9, and then just see if there's anything arising from that, that'd be helpful to pick up at that point. Is that okay?
Can I go back? Yes, I do realise that it was not going to be an easy, quick answer to that one. But I think it would be worth, as a committee, exploring what we've done more, because it's 65% of SEND children being excluded because they just can't, schools can't meet their needs. We need to find reason, need to find a solution, I think.
Nick, thank you. Yes, you'll be pleased to know that on my to-do list for future meetings is inclusions and exclusions. This committee a couple of years ago did a really good report on a task and finish group on that, and I know that there are a number of points that we're developing going forward. So yes, it is one of the things that we will be looking at, and if you're happy to wait till the next item, then we can cover. Hopefully, if not, Amelia, did you want to come back?
So it was just to say, obviously, we'll touch on this around exclusions, but it's a huge issue in and of its own right. And if the chair would be open to it, we have just appointed a new manager who set up a new team, and I would very welcome the opportunity to focus in on this area at a future meeting.
Without detracting from the current agenda item, that I think going forward, inclusion, exclusion, and the impact across the county are going to be something that we look at quite regularly in coming months for this year. So yeah, thank you, Amelia, for that. Members, any further questions? I'm just conscious that I don't want to miss anyone. Councillor Cravis.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully the motion. I mean, I think recall this being discussed last time, and I know it was, I think I might have asked for a breakdown on areas, but I mean, I do always feel with things like this is all way above my pay grade and I struggle to understand it all. But it was just a breakdown between the different areas, the east and the west, etc., and whether that's available for members. As much as I care about the whole of Somerset, I might be slightly biased towards the west of the county. Biased would be the wrong word, but I think the members know what I mean.
Focused. I'm not sure whether anyone wanted to come back on that because
Thank you, and I might, and if I'm asking, if I'm answering this out of turn, and I'm sure someone like Liz Hughes might help me out with this. I think some of the east and west focus might be around working with our police colleagues who look at the county in an east and west half. What's actually either side of the dividing line? I couldn't pretend I know the answer to that, but I think that might be why we're looking at it in that regard. I don't know if that helps you, Mark. And I don't know if I'm talking nonsense. So if anybody else on the course can say it's not because it's kind of aligning with that police division, I think that might be the answer.
It's coming from, but it's more the, I mean, cause you talked about the data and the actual evidencing and impacts. I wrote down your words because I wouldn't have thought of those. And it's how that is affecting, the youth in in my neck of the woods, for want of a better word. And if that means that is down to the police's east and west and Somerset West thing, then that's fine. But I just wonder if that info is available.
what I'll do, Maria, did you want to?
I was the one who used the words evaluating the impact, and that was in relation to the insight visit. And just to assure you that actually we did go visit both emergency departments in the east and the west, so Musgrove Park Hospital and Yeovil District Hospital, because we wanted to evaluate the impact of lots of work that had gone on within Somerset NHS Foundation Trust since the Joint Targeted Area Inspection. So that was what we were doing. It wasn't across the Somerset, but we specifically looked west and east of Somerset as well through those both ED departments.
Thank you, and I'll add a little bit to that. That's some of the reason why I've specifically chosen to remind members that they can get involved, because one of the best ways to understand how things are happening, how and what things are happening in their area, is to go along to meet up with officers one way or another. That's at any level, and I from personal experience, I cannot emphasize enough how beneficial it is to just take that time, and to, even if it's half a day that you have to say, I'm free this, what can we do? And I know all the service and our partners will work very hard to make it as beneficial as possible, and it will also give you the knowledge that we need to be able to understand things, processes a little bit better. Richard, thank you.
Yeah, just to add in, there's no substitute for that engagement and seeing how things happen on the ground. But we are working on some area profiles, which will be at a sort of neighbourhood level, and they'll be on the Connect Somerset website and the neighbourhood pages, the new ones which we've launched, just to give people a sense of kind of what the differences are between their neighbourhood and other places, what priorities there might be, things they want to really focus on. So once we've got those published, that might be something that's helpful to share with colleagues around the table.
Excellent. And while we're on that, then of course the Somerset Intelligence website is always an interesting data source for members to pin down on some of the more graphics, more detailed elements to allow them to drill down within their divisions. Okay, looking to move on then, rather than hold us up. So Liz and Maria, thank you very much for joining us, taking the time to join us online. Jane, thank you for the report. Thank you very much. And members, I cannot emphasize enough the benefit that there is for going. So if you have some time over the next few weeks, please reach out either to myself or through Jane to try and find a way to link in. So thank you, members, for that. Okay, I'm pleased to say, I don't want to tempt fate, are ahead of time. My chair schedule was looking to take a short comfort break here, but I'm going to look to move on to our next. So we're item agenda 8 is the SEND inspection preparation. and I believe that Amelia is presenting this. Heather, would you would you do the introduction, or would we do Amelia straight over? So
Well, no, I'm just to say it's a tiny introduction as well. We find our right place and because we're zipping along. So first of all, very good. No, this is just an explanation for us all about and a briefing about how we would, because we are in the window for a SEND inspection. So we need to be, and we are trying to keep ourselves as prepared as we can be all the way through. And so this is just an update from Amelia as to what the team has been doing in preparation for it. And it'd be quite nice if we had to wait as long as we waited for the youth violence one, which is about 2 years. But so the youth justice team. So hopefully we won't be on tenterhooks for 2 years, but then it's quite nice not to have it next week. So, but we have to be as prepared as we can be. And Amelia's going to.
Heather, thank you. Amelia, if you haven't already done it, could you explain what Heather meant by being in the window?
Thank you. And it's quite an important question for any inspected service to understand who inspects you, how they inspect you, and when they inspect you. And a critical question is to what extent, this gets a bit granular, but if you'll let me go into this level of detail. The question of when they inspect depends on whether the inspectorate has the discretion to judge the level of risk involved or whether they are constrained by legislation. So schools have a legislative window, and that's what Heather's referring to, where based on the legislation, Ofsted has the discretion to decide on a risk basis when a school would be inspected. But when it comes to the end of its statutory window, it must be inspected regardless of risk. That does not apply to SEND inspections because Ofsted does not use a statutory framework to inspect on SEND. They use an enabling power rather than a constraining power. So it has been more than 5 years. Indicatively, that we would say we were in the window because they indicate that they'd be looking for a 5-year cycle, but they have discretion to judge and they are not constrained and we would in any case are over that period of time. It has been more than 5 years since we last had a full inspection. Sorry, it's a slightly long answer to that one. I think you have all had a copy of the briefing. I don't know if we're able to share that on screen for the benefit of colleagues who may not have the papers in front of them. If I may, I don't know if we wanted to take a question from Ruth before we did the item.
So you, in effect, you're looking for someone to put the presentation up for you to talk to. Is that what you're asking?
If that's possible, otherwise I assume that everyone has copies of the briefing that was
behind the scenes. Will facilitate that while so in effect, so what you say, so we jump to Ruth's question, or sorry, the question from the Somerset Parent Forum in the first instance. So that's been shared as one of the supplementary bits that are there, members. Do you want me to read it out, or are you happy to respond to?
I'm happy. So if I may, Ruth, and please correct me. The thrust of the question was that the briefing that has been circulated provides an indicative timetable, and Ruth rightfully questioned whether that was correct, given that the timetable is not devised by the local authority; it's agreed by stakeholders and by Ofsted at the point of inspection. So it's just to clarify, which I agree is not transparent in the briefing, but absolutely, as we would have expected to make clear in this meeting, that is illustrative only based on the framework. So that timetable cannot be determined in advance. It can only be determined at the point of inspection by the inspectorate. Ruth, I don't know if that answers the question.
That's fine. So in effect, for members, the question says that there was an indication that there were some presumptions made in the briefing, the paper that was sent out with the hypothetical timetable attached to it. What the service is saying is that it's just that it was a hypothetical process and there was no assumptions. Obviously, if you can, we need a written response to that. We can formally table that and get it linked in and sent across, which will then allow us to review that going forward. But thank you for the response. We've got the presentation up. Are there any other? So you happy to proceed now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Where we do have an acronym, but I think it's one everyone's familiar with, we are subject to a local area SEND, Special Educational Needs and Disabilities inspection. And the key point to emphasise from the beginning is that this is not an inspection of the local authority. However, the local authority plays a significant role, but it is an area inspection and should be looking at the operation of the area as a whole. I think in our experience, the local authority plays a significant role in that, and obviously we have significant statutory responsibilities. So things we'll just touch on what it is, who's in scope, the focus, an overview of the schedule is said that's entirely indicative, timeline, and some pointing to additional information. So the area SEND inspection is conducted by the CQC and Ofsted. Ofsted spends most of their time inspecting schools. They're the Education Inspectorate. Care Quality Commission obviously is focused on health. And it is looking at how effectively we meet the needs of children and young people with SEND, special educational needs and or disabilities. And it is there is a focus on co-production, how we identify need, health pathways, and on leadership. And there's a very detailed report. What I would say is that this is the framework itself is time limited. It has been identified that the framework has not necessarily met all the needs of the system. And there's a commitment, an outstanding commitment by Ofsted to review it, but this framework remains in place until such time as a new framework has been introduced. And we don't yet have a timetable for that. So the focus is on how local area partners work together to plan, evaluate, and develop the system. And some of the key partners in that are the health system, the council, the safeguarding partnership, and the parent care forum. And obviously Ruth is here and a member of this group. These are not the only agencies who are responsible for SEND. Those are the ones who bear most of the responsibility of coordination of our response and strategy. But obviously the delivery is very much in the hands of schools, settings and colleges, as well as other frontline practitioners in the different systems. So it's a very, very large number of people who are involved in SEND, and that has sometimes been operationally difficult from an inspection perspective and has raised some of the questions about the framework, about who actually is responsible for tackling some of the wicked issues like Councillor O'Donnell has raised, because it needs a cooperation and a collaboration, including with parents, because parents are critical to the system. Parents and carers, I should say. So the focus of the inspection, the overarching focus is on two key questions. You can see them there. So the first one is evaluating the impact on the experiences and outcomes of children and young people. And that's about timeliness. How well do we identify their needs in a timely way? Are they participating? Are they getting help at the right time? Are they prepared for their next steps? And focus on outcomes. And then that incredibly important question, are they valued, visible and included in their communities? Leah has already flagged the importance of that principle of inclusion as a general way of operating in our area as a whole. The second area of focus is about how we work together. So are leaders ambitious? Are they actively engaging and working with children, young people and families? Do they have a shared understanding? How are we commissioning? How are we evaluating what we commission and provide? And again, that cultural question, do they create an environment in which effective practice and multi-agency working can flourish? So you can see there is a strong thread in both the first area of focus and the second, which is about attitudes, culture, values and behaviours, because we know very, very clearly that when those break down, as they have in Somerset, and something that we've touched on many times in this committee, when they break down, it is the children's outcomes that see the consequences of that. So just to give a sense of how the inspection would take place, so there's a notice period. Day one of the clock, as it were, is the day that notice is received. I regret to inform you that the local area nominated officer is myself. But that will be my coordination. I have very effective and experienced support in our team who works in children's services regulated to support inspection. And it's a 3-week timetable. So there is an overview of the schedule there, and a key element that we're working on in terms of preparation is about the planning and pre-inspection analysis and the ability to respond to their requests for information, data, and documentation. And this is something we're doing a very considerable part, a piece of very detailed work. It is a huge endeavour to respond to their advance request for information, and we're working on that as we speak with colleagues to make sure that we are prepared, and that is kept live. As we said, we are in, as you call, the window. There is also then collection of data, including a very, very large survey of children themselves, and we are looking at our surveying and grateful to some of the leadership that the Parent Care Forum is providing to look again at how we go out to parents' carers for their views routinely and not only at the point of inspection. So, as we said, the timetable is agreed with inspectors. They give an outline, and so as we indicate, we can give you an indication of what that would look like, but that is something that would be an early activity, and they will focus in the preliminary stages on pre-inspection analysis, and that's week 2, and there may begin to have meetings with local stakeholders. Inspection week 3 is when they are on site. So there's 2 full weeks of preparation, and there's a lot of information for them to gather and look at. Week 3, they are on site and they are meeting with providers, services, children, and recording findings. And at the end of week 3, findings are fed back to the local area partnership. So as you said, just indicative week 1, there are things like multi-agency audits. So tracking individual cases, uploading data, initial calls, documents shared. Week 2, looking at, they are doing their desk-based reviews, their initial meetings, you can see in the back end of that week, looking at tracked cases. And then week 3 on site, they'll be looking at meetings with a range, it'll be regular keeping in touch meetings, and they'll be going out and visiting sites and locations across the county. Final feedback meeting then would be at midday on the final Friday of that last week. What I would say as well is that this level of one of the things that helps an inspection go well is preparation. As I said, we have a team that's very experienced in supporting with this. What we've done is we have identified a lead for every different dimension that inspectors would be looking at, and we're using what is called an Annex A that is provided by the Inspectorate as our guide. So colleagues are working on this to make sure that our documents are up to date, that the correct and up-to-date document is the one that's on the website, because inspectors will always look at what's online in their preparation, and that we're very clear, we know what the data is telling us, and we are very clear about where we are as a system. And obviously the next item will be touching on some of that, the overview of where we are on the journey, and also that we have been able to communicate that to wider partners about where we have been, where we are now, and where we want to get to. So that's our immediate focus.
Thank you. So one would assume, excuse me, when I'm waiting for my members to indicate if they want to ask questions, one would assume if you had some trial runs, as it were, to run it through, so that officers are used to the system and ready to rock and roll, as it were.
So there's different dimensions to that we're focusing on, and we have an inspection readiness group. So one of the things that we need to effectively have ready to go, as I said, is about documentation and data, so that we know we are lined up. As soon as we press the button, we can meet their requirements. That's one dimension. As I said, the Parent Care Forum is supporting us to look at reinstating the annual survey, because we need to both communicate where we are particularly with our parent care community, but also hear their voices and make sure that we're giving them those opportunities to communicate. So that's a trial run, as it were, but it's also fundamentally important for our operations. And then we're also focusing on that communication about making sure that we are clear what our story is, and we have shared that appropriately and been able to listen to feedback for that very, very significant number of practitioners and leaders out in the system. There must be at least 10,000 people who work in this area, and making sure that they are getting what they need to understand where we are.
Thank you for that. First question, Ruth. Well, the system. So I'll chuck one in then. So just while we're waiting for the comms to come in. So risks. What do you see as the biggest issue out there? And I'll make sure that they don't read the minutes of this meeting or see this after.
So I think the biggest risk is that we're on a journey, and the reality is that where we are on the life cycle of transformation, things are being put in place, but it's still very new. And I've read many inspection reports in my life, and it's a very frequent thing to say. We can see that there are green shoots. We see that some good things have been put in place, but it is too early. It hasn't yet embedded. And I would say our biggest risk is timing. We simply need more time for the good things that are being put in place to bear fruit in terms of children, young people and their families' lived experiences. It's not yet cutting through enough into kind of real life examples.
Thank you. Ruth, are you live now?
Hopefully it's working now. Okay, good. So you mentioned very briefly around ensuring that documents are all up to date and that we haven't got anything on our website that's out of date. She's looking at me knowing I found something. My question, as we know from looking at SEND inspection reports, is that joint commissioning is huge. Lots and lots of them refer to joint commissioning. Our joint commissioning strategy is out of date, ended on 2024. What is the plan? And I'm sure you're probably going to defer to Paul Richard in a minute about updating our strategy. And I'm slightly concerned that the action plan for it is actually dated 2022.
I can see that Richard is poised, so I'm going to defer.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. Yeah, we're aware that the joint commissioning strategy needs to be updated. I've spoken to Louise Palmer, who's the lead in this area, and obviously we need to do that with partners. So we're just setting up conversations now to try and look into how we develop that strategy and refresh it. But Louise is on it at the moment.
Thanks for that, Ruth, and thank you for the response. Some of the reason why I ask if we've had a trial run is so that sort of thing we can deal with and have a response ready for. It's always it's sometimes useful in these situations to have someone from outside do a pretend run through, so that in effect you've got a critical friend looking at what this is, rather than being caught out in the bad way. So that was the reason that Ruth highlighted it. So thank you for that. Nick, thank you.
Thank you very much. Someone who's undergone a few inspections in my time. Yes, and I guess this is our first inspection as Somerset Council, because I've seen the last one. Are there any outstanding recommendations from a previous report that we have yet to deal with? Because that would be certainly a priority to ensure that we have done.
So the original full inspection, and there was a monitoring inspection in the intervening period. The original full inspection had 9 areas of significant weakness. It was quite a challenging report. And for those of you who were around at the time, you recall some of the quite almost distressing things that they found, and there was a real push by everyone involved to address them. The majority of those, so 7 of those, were resolved at the monitoring inspection. There were 2 remaining, and we had an accelerated progress plan for the 2 remaining areas. The first was shut about 18 months ago, I believe, which was around identification of need. And the second one was, as you just raised, around exclusions of children with SEND. We met with the Department for Education in February this year, and we were able to evidence not that the problem has been entirely resolved, but that all the indicators are pointing to the strategy beginning to take effect, and they closed that area, that outstanding area. Are we content with where we are as a system? No, much more needs to be done, but they consider that sufficient progress had been made against the original area to shut it.
Thank you. Francis, Councillor Nicholson.
Yes, and forgive me if I haven't read carefully enough, but I remember that inspection well, and the huge amount of multi-agency work that went on, the progress that's been made, and absolutely that more is needed. But this is, I think, this is a different framework. They will be looking for different things. What's different, and what are the areas that which are now to the fore and we're worried about, as opposed to what we were?
That's helpful, and what I would say is absolutely focusing as well on the feedback that we get from other areas who have been inspected under this framework. There's what is stated in the framework and written on the page, and then there is what inspectors bring with their areas of particular interest at that moment in time, and we'll do those across schools and looking at those kind of themes as well. So I would say there's sort of two things that we're seeing a really heightened focus on, and one of them is around alternative provision. So there is a huge focus on alternative provision, on the rigor of how well we know settings, on what they're providing, on who is in them, and that's something that we are very focused on as well. And I think the second area that is getting a lot of focus nationally, and I think there was just published the inspection report in Dorset, is around the locality arrangements. And we'll be touching on that in a moment, that focus on coming around localities to deal with those emerging issues collaboratively is both in the Southwest, but appears nationally also a significant area of focus. And so both of those are things that we're putting a lot of emphasis on, not least because they're a good thing to do, setting inspections.
Okay, thank you. The end of questions. So on that point, thank you very much, Amelia. What I'll do, members, we are a little bit ahead of time, but I will take a 5-minute break now. If we look to, at 10 minutes, so I'll look to restart again at 11:30. So I'll adjourn the meeting till 11:30. Thank you. Okay, so welcome back for those of you online. Sorry, you saw me talking to myself for a while, so we're back. So thank you very much. So agenda item 9 is the DSG DMP. We don't really love acronyms. Designated school grant and the deficit management plan update and progress. Amelia, I think the slides will magically appear.
The slides about to magically appear. Any moment there?
They're on their way.
They're on their way. I will kick off regardless while we're waiting for the magic to happen.
As if by magic.
Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to address the committee on this topic. What I would like to do today is to, as it were, take a step back and to retrace the journey that we have been on, because we are preparing a deficit management plan. But when that comes to this committee, it feels important that the committee is cited on what has already happened, where we are on that transformation journey, and what is likely to be in that plan. So if I may, if I'll just sort of take you through, and these are some of the dialogue that we've been having with our school system, because in order for us to manage the deficit, it's absolutely critical that we be of one a purpose and direction with our school setting and college-based colleagues, because there is nothing that we can achieve in terms of reducing deficit or improving outcomes without their full cooperation. So if we can just start off with some images, and if you will excuse me on the first slide, what we've been trying to talk to our school-based colleagues about is the journey. And the journey started last year with schools. When I took up post in April of last year, the feedback that I had from school-based colleagues in particular was that they felt that urgent change was required. And we did some very focused work with head teachers in particular, but also supported by the Parent Care Forum, engaging with our parent care community in looking at the data and the engagement that has been done extensively with children, and also talking to the early years community and post-16. So there was a really extensive listening exercise to hear their concerns, and there were some very clear messages that came out from that, which was, I would say, with some very kind of detailed points, but the overarching point was it takes too long and it feels too hard to secure children the support that they require. And this touches on the point that you raised, Councillor O'Donnell, about it's not just about resources, it's about having a community around you, it's about being part of a team, it's about working together and feeling like you're getting somewhere and change is happening. So that's really sort of summarised there in terms of the you know, getting to the core of it, and really what is it we need to focus on. We then had what I would describe as a long cold winter, and you will all be familiar, as we briefed this committee previously, that there is a large scale reorganisation in the council. Within education, across children's services, we took that as an opportunity to not just realise savings, but instead to realise transformation. And I just want to give all the credit to my team, who have been extraordinarily resilient and professional in very, very difficult circumstances. There was over 90 people who were given notice of redundancy. I'm very pleased to say a very high proportion of them have secured new roles, but there has been a lot of soul searching and people having to think really hard about doing something quite different from what they did before, and they have really risen to the challenge. But it's a very, very difficult process, and it was very lengthy. We're now, the new structure came in to effect on the 1st of April. Our commitment to the school system was that we would have new ways of working in place for the start of summer term, 2 weeks later. And I'm incredibly proud of the speed with which people have stepped into that space. Generating new processes, establishing new teams, recruiting into posts, and communicating everywhere about changes. So it has, and the kind of comparison we've described it as, you're driving out around Somerset over the past 6 weeks or so, it's exploded. There's just green everywhere. Everything is growing like crazy. I think that's absolutely where we are. But also you see, you have in your garden, the weeds grow as well. So you've had to identify gaps and holes and issues that need to be addressed quite quickly because of all of that change. But the key point is we are not there yet. We are in a process of change and transformation, and we absolutely do believe that that's showing that will bear fruit, but we're not there yet, and we will need to continue to report to this committee, and that fruit will be when we're seeing this impact on the ground and the realisation of better outcomes for children, young people and their families. Next slide, please. So just in terms of the more pragmatic details, so that was in April 24, we undertook this major listening exercise. We had a formal public consultation on funding and provision in September. A formal staff consultation started in October. In March, there was a decision to deliver a large-scale programme of SEND units, which I'll touch on. And then in April was the start of locality arrangements, which I'll describe as well. We are still awaiting a plan for legislative change from the government. We were promised that in spring 2025. It has not materialised. Last we've heard is that it will be later this year. But all of our contacts in the department are being very, very tight-lipped and have given no indication of what that might contain. We are still working on decisions around funding and provision, and that is the DMP, the Deficit Management Plan proper. So that is still in train, and I'll touch on that. And there's more transformation around flexible education, and I'll describe what I mean by that as we go. So key questions I'd just like to touch on today in terms of committee being fully briefed. What we mean by localities, easy to say, difficult to do. What our progress is being made on SEND units, what a model provision is, what is it involved, some other key enablers, and how they'll support a dedicated schools grant deficit management plan. Thank you. So hopefully this is a very familiar slide to some of you. What this represents is the shape of localities and neighbourhoods. The boundaries that you see are those that were adopted originally by Connect Somerset. They are the primary care network boundaries in the main. There are 13 primary care networks. These are 12. But as Richard has often indicated, if we are going to organise, and health are a key partner, we have to organise around their boundaries. Those are not going to change. And so those have been adopted. And the black lines that you can see is how we are using those boundaries in education. So we, resourcing wise, can't resource 12 neighbourhoods, but we can resource 6 areas to get closer to communities. And that was the basis of the reorganisation, staffing reorganisation, to enable us to operate on those boundaries. The question is why? Why would you do this? One of the things, and I've been speaking to head teachers over the past couple of weeks, one of the things that professionals said to us was, if you are a professional in a school, college or setting, some of their experience has been that they have to do the joining up in the multi-agency space. So as I said a few moments ago, talking about inspection, it's a multi-agency inspection. There are a lot of players in this space. And what head teachers have frequently said to us, as other colleagues have, we are having to join up your mess. You are not connected enough for us, and we don't have the capacity to make this make sense. Can you connect yourselves before you engage with us? And that's what a locality is for. And the way that we do that is we bring professionals around a single table. And that's why the map matters, because that defines the table. And that's where the professionals then start to come together to see children in the round. And that's an absolutely critical point. What we have identified is that we have been putting children into boxes based on the needs that they have identified. There's a box for low attendance, there's a box for risk of exclusion, there's a box for disability, there's multiple boxes for different disabilities, and the list goes on. But actually children don't come in neat boxes, and some of our children are most concerned about will tick every one of those boxes. We need to see them in the round, and we need to understand their risk and vulnerability in the round. But it's no good bringing professionals around the table and looking at children around if you don't do anything about it. And so part of the reorganisation has been about increasing our frontline capabilities so that we have staff with specific skills, so there is more capacity to do direct work with children, families, and schools, and having the specific skill sets that schools or other institutions may not be able to, and likely cannot resource within their own capabilities, which is why they're coming to us. If they were able to do it, they would, but they come to the end of what they're able to do. A key part is a lead professional. I'll touch on that in a moment. It's not a new concept, but it's one that we're really leaning into. But also about accountability. And often when we use that phrase, people in the education system will think about the stick, but actually there is a real carrot in accountability as well, which is about trust, relationships, and peer-to-peer being part of a relationship where you say, I work with you, you work with me. When I say I'm going to do something, I do it, and you can rely on me. And that's about that, building those networks of cooperation. And one of the things I think we perhaps have all encountered is about, we do not have ultimate discretion to do whatever we want. We have an absolutely staggering amount of statutory frameworks, legislation, policy, guidance, conditions of funding. Every single professional group has got their own set. We've identified 220 separate statutory responsibilities in local authority children's services alone, and then the police have as many, and so do health. So one of the things we have to do in localities is to make all that make sense, because government doesn't do it for us. And so in order to be able to respond appropriately, we need to bring all those things together and find that narrow path that makes it make sense. And then finally, it's about sharing intelligence. In order to see the child, we need to know about them, not just as a number, but as a person. And that's about understanding what happened last night, where the police got involved. It's about which professional said that on Tuesday, or where did that get written down about what was going to happen. And all of that coordination takes really sophisticated work to happen smoothly and intuitively. So the key point is none of this is easy. When it works, it feels as natural as breathing. all of the complex transformation that has to sit behind it to make this really natural and human focused is very, very, it takes a long time, it's complex, it's difficult, but we're doing all of that and we're making great progress. We're not there yet. And that's just really important that our stakeholders, and I think schools and settings and colleges have been brilliant in recognizing that we're on the right track, but it takes time. Next slide. One of the key things, and I know that this committee is familiar with this long journey around transform and transform family view. But we're doing a big push on transform family view, and the hook for schools, and many schools are big advocates. I know Sławek is sometimes attended this committee, and he will say he's a big advocate and a user in his school. But not everyone is. And now is the moment where they really need to grasp the nettle, because Transform has this amazing potential. And you can see all of the different complex systems, and Transform speaks to all of them. So each of those green and purple bubbles that you see is a different management information system in a different organization or part of the system. And Transform does that magical thing of pulling all of that together in one accessible place. I think that's been a dream of us who've worked in children's services a long time, for at least 20, 30 years. Turns out it's really hard, but we're now on the cusp of being able to achieve that. But it means people buying into it and people using it, because that's when data comes to life and people are able to say, I know that child, and that's not her mum, or I know that little boy, that's not where he lives, and that's when the data will really become powerful. And so we're doing a big push on that, and part of the incentive is that we're embedding the names of those locality professionals into Transform, because that's one of the things that school and setting practitioners have said consistently is they want to know who to contact. And they want that information to be up to date. Well, only with a live system is that possible, but we're now there. And there's now named contacts across the educational relationship managers, the senior EPs, the family intervention team leaders, Connect Somerset. All of these named roles are now attached to every single locality, and that's in Transform. So it's a huge milestone for us in the school system. Thank you. So this is what we've been talking to people in the education system about, is getting to, and at some point that those tiles will get larger. So we're having more and more conversations across the system about what that will look like. And Jane will be talking to you as it develops about social reform. And the big work it would take to include child protection on these kinds of footprints. We're also talking to health and to the police, who have been incredibly supportive about this direction of travel and about making their own transformation on a similar geography. We await to see what that might turn into. So you can see we've got some who's already there. Education relationship management, that's one of my teams. The family intervention service and education engagement, now working in a multi-agency way in children's services. Incredibly exciting, a lot of work to do there, but huge potential. Send assessment and review, that's our delivery of education health care plans, but also this new virtual school, this expanded function that is looking at children with some of our most complex and acute situations. We've got our locality meetings have started. I'll touch on those. Connect Somerset, really we're for kind of first in the room and leading the way on that. And then we know that health visiting has joined children's services. And as I said, opening conversations with the police about what that might look like. So very, very exciting, but very much developmental. And as we said, only a few weeks into those new arrangements. And let me just, we've got TAS, TAC. TAS stands for Team Around the School, you can see in green there, and TAC, Team Around the Child, in blue. Those are probably familiar language in the education system, so we're not doing anything wacky. This is well-established practice, but what we're doing is we're making sure that we are consistent, everyone does the same thing, and we only have one model. So the Team Around the School is about that strategic conversation that says, what does this school need? How do they need to develop? What do they have within their resources and what do they not? Coming to your point, Councillor O'Donnell, do they have what they need to be the school that they want? And Team Around the Child is that intensive conversation around that individual child. There's also a team around the family, which is established practice when there's more than one child who needs to be part of the conversation. So we're really investing in getting this right and making sure that that's working. Thank you. A key element of this is the lead professional. Again, very well established in children's services. It's something that we have struggled to get right for a long time, not through want of trying, but because this is difficult. So we're trying again, and we're being really, really clear that this is across all of our professional disciplines. So it's not the most senior person, but it's about the person who knows that situation best, who's our point person. And the default is always the lead professional is within the school setting, because when the school setting has got the resources that they need, they will be the lead professional. But when the lead professional comes into the multi-agency space, that's because that school setting no longer has everything that they need within their resources, and they need to reach out. And so it's about being really clear when that happens, about that person knowing that they're being designated, and that's being done by a senior panel. So it's someone doesn't have to step in and volunteer. That's an appointment. And then also about that responsibility for communicating that relationship. It doesn't have to be for the long term. That lead professional comes in, does what's within their gift, and then that may move on. A brief update about SEND units, which we've touched on previously. This is moving ahead at pace. We are undertaking feasibilities when the survey will go out and do a more detailed assessment of what is required and potential cost. Very pleased to say that Tim Cockrell, who you'll know in his senior role in educational psychology, is commissioned to lead on high quality provision, because you can build a room, but the education is what happens within it. I'm very excited about the connection with the national PINS, which stands for Partnerships for Neurodiversity in Schools program, which is coming into year 2. It's a very heavyweight program, and that connection, I think, is exciting. The program can and will change. So we've had some schools come forward who don't need capital works, but think that they can provide within their space. They move more quickly. Others, we might find that that takes a bit longer, but that flexibility is key. So that's moving on quickly. Thank you. The concept of flexible education is one that we consulted on in the autumn, and was supported by both professionals and parents. And what we're doing is we're putting the enablers in place, because it's about an approach and a way of thinking. We have a PRU advisory group, and we are considering the possibility of formal consultation, and that would come to this committee. AP contracting, and there's a paper going to the executive around dynamic purchasing, which is about, as we said, a key issue that the inspectorate are interested in, to make sure that we are getting value for money, that we're working collaboratively with our providers, and that what's happening when a child is placed has oversight and is quality. But we've had fantastic response from our AP community of providers who are keen to work with us and keen to work with each other. Fair Access Protocol is a statutory piece of guidance that the local authority has to issue. I'm very pleased to say that we've appointed now a dedicated manager for preventing exclusion, who is establishing her team, which is brilliant. And the Association of Secondary Schools has voluntarily taken action to look at this and to share, and we'll be speaking to them to hear their findings, because they're critical in the delivery of a more successful approach. I said the virtual school is a statutory responsibility of the local authority, but we now have an expanded virtual school. When fully staffed, it will have 88 staff, and they are taking on beyond their statutory responsibilities to pick up other children who have a comparable level of risk and need. So that's very excited about that potential, and that may be something that this committee would like to hear more about on a future date. As I said, we have a number of new functions. So we have now created focused capacity on attendance monitoring. You'll be aware that this is a national issue. Around disputes and resolution, and something this committee has been interested in, we now are creating a dedicated team to focus on this area. Around inclusive curriculum and teaching, we've brought all of our mainstream capacity together with our specialists to have make it as high powered as we can. I touched on preventing exclusion. SEND assessment and review is now locality based. Supported internships is a very, very exciting area, and we've been really pressing this with schools. It's something that we want to do a lot more of, and now we have a dedicated team to do that. And as I said, the virtual school, building up that capacity in that area. And you can see on the next slide, touching on supported internships, We have a huge number of organisations who are involved in this space. If you're not familiar with the concept of a supported internship, many people have heard of apprenticeships. A supported internship is an incredible innovation. It is an unpaid work placement. But what that child has alongside them, what that young person has, is a work coach, a mentor who helps them learn the job. And 80% of young people who go into a supported internship secure permanent employment. And the evidence nationwide is that once a child has secured permanent employment, that is usually lifelong, their employability. So it transforms life chances in the most dramatic way. So we will be continuing to make the point that this needs to both expand and be better understood across the county. Deficit management plan, you've seen the figures around the deficit, and I'm sure colleagues can take more detailed conversations from finance if colleagues want to go into this. We are forecasting in the region of £100 million deficit for next year. This is a huge risk to the local authority. The key thing about the deficit is that if we serve children better, this will be cheaper. Number of the costs that we are fielding are the costs of not being able to meet children's needs and children experiencing distress and dysregulation as a result. So if we can serve children better, this will hit the bottom line positively because it will impact on the costs of those children's outcomes being less than we would hope. Next slide. So the key thing to understand in terms of the budget is around the statutory override. This is an accounting treatment that the government permits local authorities essentially to disregard this deficit for the purposes of judging whether this, a Section 114 needs to be declared. The statutory override is scheduled to expire nationwide on the 31st of March 2026. If at that point the deficit is in the region of £100 million or even less than that, that would be absolutely sufficient to trigger a Section 114 notice. This is not just the case for Somerset. I think at the latest count, there's a region of up to a half of local authorities where that would be the case, where they would be either declaring Section 114 the next day or within a short time window. So it is a national crisis level issue. We are assured that this is being considered at the highest level up to the Treasury and number 10, but we have had no assurances, nor have any other local authorities. And both Richard and I sit on ADCS, Association of Director of Children's Services subcommittees, and are aware of discussions about legislative and financial change, but have been given no assurances. Slide. So an enormous amount of work is underway, and I'd just like to recognise the huge contribution that's being made by colleagues in finance and sporting, education in this area. We've had an external consultancy people too who have also supported, and we've been hearing their feedback in recent days. The work involved in this is extremely complex. We're talking about huge numbers of children, individual arrangements for all of them. There are 5,500 children receiving dedicated funding. So this is a very complex piece of work, but obviously as soon as something is ready to be shared, it will come to this committee.
Thank you. I think the title of the report is probably deceiving with the amount of information that's there. This is the localities detail is something that I think this committee really welcomes there, and I'll be candid now to see the slide around the transform stuff and the data sharing, where we had conversations about the JTI and the need for data sharing there, and the way that it as I said previously, the first ever time I sat in to chair a meeting for Children and Families Scrutiny Committee, we were talking about data and the need for data sharing and how that will be the thing that makes our ability to help young people better. And to see that slide with transform there, I'll be honest, this first time I knew about it, so that's something that I will be looking deeper into to understand. It was really helpful, and I'm not sure there are some other members around the table that probably feel the same. I think that presentation was really helpful for me, and I hope really helpful for members around. So thank you for that. It just goes to show that the Director of Education is sitting there telling us about how our service is developing as a whole. That's heartening as well. So thank you for that, Amelia. Members, I'm just filling in the gap. So we'll start off with Francis. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got 4 questions. Do you want me to do them one at a time or all at once?
The question, did they overlap? Different
questions.
Do them one at a time then.
Right, okay. The transform, absolutely, page 35 of the slides. It's so good to see this getting there. Schools aren't on it. Are schools, I mean, it seems to me really important that schools should have access. Are they likely to have only read access? Are there still any problems about people saying, oh, it's confidential, schools aren't really the people who should be seeing this, or are we there? That's the first question.
So I think there's 2 issues there. Should schools have access? I think that's entirely accepted that yes, they absolutely should. I think Richard can just unpack exactly what that access entails. Not every professional has precisely the same access on Transform, but absolutely having schools use it, and not just access for a single point in the school, but having multiple people within that school having access is the goal. What I would say is, as you will be well aware, schools are very busy places, and anything new that they need to engage in proactively takes a lot of repeating. But that's why we're being very clear. This is one of our drumbeat messages. You must be on Transform. You must have multiple people in the school who are on Transform. It's very easy for people to sign up. They just have to email. But the important thing is that they know that they're signing up for a reason, which is why embedding the locality context in Transform is critical, because they will say, I need to know who to contact. Right. Are you on Transform? Because we're not going to give you that information unless you get access to the system, because it's the added value and you need to catch people in their moment of motivation. So there's a little bit of opportunism there to try and get that mass sign up at this moment in time.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful.
Yeah, shall I just add to that? So almost all schools have access to Transform, but like as Amelia was saying, it can be one person maybe in the school, and we need more people to be having that access. But yeah, the sign up process is relatively easy. There's short training, webinars, things like that, and there's a DPIA, so data sharing agreement to sign as well. But absolutely, we want all schools to be using it, and some voluntary sector organisations as well.
That's really helpful. I just wonder whether the schools therefore somehow need a blob on that slide, because I wasn't quite clear from that. Second question, if I may, on page 36, building the locality model, there are some bits that are ticked, some bits that are not ticked, some bits that are not ticked which have got a red underline, which I'm not quite sure what that means. One that worries me, because it's got neither a tick nor a red underline, is housing. And casework locally has taught me, particularly since unification, and we know our local members are involved in housing questions, how crucial that is for children and for their education, and for stability of their place at school and so on. Should it have a tick? Yes, please. Should it be red underlined? If red underlined means this is urgent, yes, I think it should. But can you tell me what the situation is?
If I could just interpret my slightly cryptic lines and ticks, the tick is simply they are in the meeting. It's happened. We're there already. The underline is it's in train. We're not quite nailed down, but it's moving. And the others are slightly longer timeline, not there yet. But absolutely, it's not an indication. It's not a priority. It's just an indication of how far have we got in that conversation.
Yes, and I would really stress the urgency of housing, because it wrecks children at school if they don't have a stable place to live somewhere within reach of the school that they're already at. So that's that one. Then the third one is you say in the team around the school and team around the child and the locality meetings, they're looking at it. Do the schools have what they need? Now, in terms of expertise, this and so on, and advice and support, absolutely, that's something that we have a place in. Do they have enough money to pay for what they need to do? That's not something we can affect, is it? And they don't, or some of them don't, or it's very tricky. Is there anything on that you can say?
So I think the team around the school methodology is evolving. So the principle of meeting with every school every year with the right people around the table, we've done a bit of that. So we did do it this year, and that was moved on from what we had the year before, and it will move on again next year. It's about having the right resources, the right conversation, right people around the table. The question of what do they have in terms of resources is critical. I think my observation from looking at, or from the picture of all the conversations we've had so far, sometimes it's about cash, sometimes it isn't. And actually, I think what quite often schools will say is, we would prefer not to have this cash. What we would like is for the support to be there, because the administration of that burden is just adding or detracting from our ability to manage. So I think AP is a good example, where we have a number of schools saying, you can give us the money to manage the alternative provision. What we would really like is for you to manage the alternative provision, because we are not best placed to quality assure, to make sure the child is safe and to undertake those administrative roles, particularly when child's on a very high level of AP, and sometimes the connection with the school becomes distant. So I think it's a broader question about resourcing, which is, how do we get the child what they need without putting undue pressure on the school? And that pressure is not always financial pressure.
That's really helpful. And the last one is about the high needs block overspend. I'm aware of at least one other authority, not this one, which has taken a punt on the answer and is loading the high needs block with more and more and more overspend. Is that, I hope that isn't a risk that this council is thinking of taking.
I think that's probably a question for finance colleagues, but I would say I've been party to no question ever in any way, shape or form that would suggest we're doing anything other than to bring the overspending down.
That's really helpful. It really worries me that I'm aware of an authority that is doing the opposite.
I think it's safe to say some councils are hoping that there's going to be a white knight coming over the horizon to save all of the education budgets, but we're not certainly of that opinion. So we are, as much as possible, only spending what we have to spend, rather than necessarily loading, because that's an extremely high risk strategy, which none of us signed up to.
We also make sure that our expenditure is in line with the statutory requirements from the DfE as well. We check that annually. That's before every audit. So
thank you.
Yeah,
I have a question about that for the other authority.
Yeah, we do do that. Yeah.
Okay, was that your question?
Yeah, those are my fault. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce.
Frances and I are obviously on the same page because she's asked some of my questions already, so well done, thank you. So just a couple left. So lead professional, I just wanted to check how on board are schools and earlier settings with this approach. I'm really conscious that our schools are overloaded at the moment, having had quite a few Senkos crow on me in the last 12 months. So just really conscious about their workload, really. And then the next one is around the actual plan for the deficit management plan. We keep being told it's on its way. Is it going to appear, preferably before March?
So on the first point, I think from our interactions, and we are doing some more work with the Senko groups, the Senko forum, just to make sure that we're hearing from their voices and not just from head teachers. But I think the difference around the lead professional approach is not that we are asking schools to be lead professionals when they weren't. It's being clear about when that handover takes place and that there is a lead professional in the multi-agency space, because it's very clear in the national guidance, and I think it aligns with the expectation of a school. If the school has everything that they need to manage that child, it's entirely appropriate for them to be the lead professional, because no, they don't need anyone, nor do they want anyone else to be involved. They have what they need. The difference is about us being clear at the point when that's no longer appropriate and that there is an identified lead professional outside the school. And I think that's the difference that we're looking to tidy up, because when the school is no longer able to meet everything within its resources, it can't go into a empty, mushy, unclear space without having someone designated, and that's what needs to tighten. So I wasn't trying to duck question there. All I can say is we are working extremely hard on this, and that's across education, finance, and other teams across the council, including with external support. Answering these questions for a lot of stakeholders, where is the plan? It is just one of the most detailed and complex things any of us have ever had to work on. So I absolutely can guarantee this committee will see it as soon as we have something that is ready. It simply isn't there yet. So my apologies.
Evie.
Can I ask when we are likely to see stuff, please? Because actually, as someone who's living an absolute nightmare with no one taking responsibility, your words is we're not there yet, recognising things take time. That's what we hear quite often from professionals, but we're never given that time frame, and we're constantly chasing and being advocates for these children. And I don't see anyone taking accountability, which would be great if with cases we were told who is accountable for each section, but I don't want to hear things take time anymore. I want to see solid timeframes, because actually I'm starting to lose a little bit of faith sitting here and seeing the same things over and over again, and things being pushed back for meeting after meeting and plans not being in place.
So I make a distinction, Evie, between decisions around individual children and the DMP. So the deficit management plan is a council-wide plan for the overall strategy for reducing the overspending. That is taking a long time. The individual decisions around children should not ever be delayed or halted because of the difficulty in putting in place a strategic DMP. They should be quite different things. So if you're aware of individual cases where you're concerned about delays, I think it is the committee does need to be aware that the level of demand is such that we are now running a backlog in terms of EHCP assessments. We are endeavouring, we're having conversations about capacity to try and address that. There are delays in the system, as there are with the health service. But there absolutely are ways that if anyone needs to raise a concern about a delay, we will address that as best we can. But the DMP should not delay any individual decisions about children.
Sorry, briefly coming back, so coming on to the end of your thing that you've mentioned there, and on Councillor O'Donnell's previous thing, of 65% of children with exclusions, they're ones that we know about that are on our radar or within the system. What about those that are waiting? Is that figure likely to be a lot higher? Because there are a lot of children within our system that are waiting 18 months, 2 years for diagnosis. I would guess, from me, I'm an outsider looking in, that figure is a lot higher than 65%.
So a diagnosis is not required for a child to receive support. So I think one of the messages that we have been talking to parents and carers about is that has sometimes been a message that they've received in the system, that they require a diagnosis in order for their child to be supported. That's not the case. The diagnosis is not a pre-condition for effective support. What we are trying to do is to understand what children are currently receiving and what they are not receiving, because with 70,000 children, it's very, very easy for children to get lost in the system. So the whole point of localities is that we are able in an area to understand and have a conversation with schools to know and have a named child. Every single named child has been assessed in terms of risk. We know where they are. We know what the risk is attached to them. We know who's involved with them, and we're doing something about it. Now, the amount of transformation that it's taking for us to get into that space is absolutely huge. But everything that I've just described to you is about getting a grip on every single named child in the county where we are aware that there are unresolved issues and there is risk. So the virtual school has been designed specifically for that purpose, that we have a dedicated team who are attaching named professionals, and we are recruiting, and we've got 27 vacancies at the moment, so my team spend most of their time in interviews to get a workforce where we can have each of these children have oversight with a named person who's got them on their caseload. That has never happened before in this county. So we are working on it, but we have a huge, huge backlog of unaddressed issues to work through. And it simply takes time because these are difficult things to achieve. So you saw how long it took for us to get those teams in place. They're now in place. They're working 100 miles an hour, but it takes time.
Thank you. I'm just conscious that, as I say, the information that we've received is really helpful, and I think that it would be interested to see how it links into the more broader council. I know Richard is going to speak to us in a bit about the other elements there, but I also think, again, to make a candid point, this is the most information I've received about the locality's situation and the way that the new service is being set up and run. It's the first sight I've had of a lot of this, which is a little bit frustrating, but we've seen it now, because I think this would be helpful for councillors as a whole. So I would suggest that because it's a fundamental root and branch change in the way that we've been operating for a long time. With it maybe when I'll say that out loud so that the scrutiny manager can hear and feedback into democratic services, this would make a really good briefing for councillors. It's frustrating that we're already in it before we get to the point of the briefing to be able to feed into this. But so I think that one of the outcomes of today is that we'll have conversations with the service to see how best to conduct it, and of course with the executive member. But this would make a really good and I'm sure interesting presentation for all members. Amelia, do you want to come back on that point?
Yeah, can I just offer my personal apology to the chair and to the committee that you didn't have this presentation before today. I will just say on behalf of me and my team, I think none of us anticipated the workload that was involved to get to this point. And I think it's not an excuse, it is a genuine apology. Had we had our time again, we would have timed it better. So I do sincerely apologise for the delay.
I'm not looking for an apology. It's a statement of fact. I'm a realist. Let's look forward, not back, because we need to go. So thank you for that. But I'm just dealing with the cards that have been dealt at the moment. So to be able to thank you for that, and I think it would be really good as a. I've got one more member to ask a question, and I'm going to look to move on because I'm sure some of I'm interested in the next bit as well. So, Councillor Cravis.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you for that. Yeah, it was. You touched on it. Talk about looking back. You touched on it. When you talked about transformation, you talked about what your teams had to go through and everything else, and how do we stop? I'm going to use the acronym. It's DMP. I mean, there's two questions I suppose I've got. How do we stop this becoming a distraction as much as the best will in the world? Humans are humans, and people are. How do we stop? How do we stop this becoming a distraction to actually what the service we're trying to provide? And then looking at, I mean, I've got information overload on this, and thank you very much for it. And I actually read it before the meeting as well. But how do we then? Are you very reliant, and how reliant are you on the actual individual schools and in individual locations? And obviously, some schools are better than others. And how do you deal with it if it starts failing because of all what you've got in place starts performing less well, rather than using the word fail, because of one individual school or a couple of schools or one, do you call them, academy, etc.
Yeah, two really important questions. I think from the service perspective, the financial situation is not a distraction. It is at the absolute core of what we're doing, because as I said, the financial overspend is directly connected to children's distress. And when children become distressed, when they're not able to attend school, when they're not able to learn, that it translates into pounds for the council, because we have to put in extraordinary arrangements that are what nobody wanted. The parent didn't want their child not to be able to attend their local school like every other child. That child didn't want to have to travel an hour to and from school every day. It is not what anybody wanted. So actually, if we can get to a place where every child is able to toddle down to their local school and go to school like every other child on their street, that is going to be much cheaper, and it is going to be much better for everyone. And that's what parents want, it's what children want. So I don't see these two things as separate. And sometimes it's the case where looking for savings takes away from better outcomes. This is not one of them at all. But lining up those two things so they speak to each other is a really complex task. The second thing about schools, and I say the same for colleges, for settings, they are more important than we are in this picture. That child is not coming to the council every day, or failing, to be able to attend because that situation is no longer working. It's the school, and it's the classroom teacher, it's that SENCO, it's that school community is absolutely critical. So I would say as well, one of the things that we have been working on is not just about focusing on children in crisis and children with disabilities. It's about the whole school system, and us having better schools, stronger schools, teachers who want to work with us, TAs who will take these jobs, head teachers who can continue and not leave the profession. All of those things are absolutely critical to achieving those goals, because if our schools fail, then it doesn't matter what plan we put in place, it will just be paper. So I think that's why we're constantly talking to people in the school system, why having that trust and confidence between not just the council and other council officers, or between the multi-agency partnership, but between us, the school system with parents, and the parents with us. All of that has got into a really, really difficult place in the past. It's getting better. It is definitely getting better, but it has to continue in that place of trust and confidence. Otherwise, we might as well not even try.
Okay, thank you for that update. As I say, the slide pack probably should have been detailed a little bit more about localities update as opposed to DMP, but the information it contains is really helpful. So I'll go back, but just one thing at the end. So obviously you're working on a management plan, a deficit management plan, which again, it would be nice to be have some information on. So just the committee would, so that one's still on the to-do list to come back. But I thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the detail in it, and look forward to having a further update, which I'll add to our work programme. Thank you, Amelia. Okay, moving on then, members. Item 10 of our agenda is next up. Richard, you've got some colleagues with you. Do you want to move up to the table so that they can feel involved? Thank you. You'd have seen our tech is playing up, so Richard, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to introduce Laura, who's joining us today. She's heading up Connect Somerset for the council and across the system, and Natasha as well. So from Yeovil Arts Centre, she's one of our 12 Connect Somerset champions. So very pleased she's able to join us, and we can have a conversation around Connect Somerset and kind of what it really means locally. And then we meet every month or so with Ruth and Toby. Toby's not able to make it today, but Ruth will be able to give you some reflections from that sort of additional scrutiny and engagement that we're going through on a periodic basis as well. So this is really interesting time. I'm sure we all know there are sort of continued challenging financial settlements, as we were hearing earlier. But it's also a difficult time for some residents, particularly vulnerable residents, and that leads to higher demand. And we were hearing earlier about how some services feel really overwhelmed at the moment, not able to engage, really challenged, probably focusing on their core elements of what they do rather than more widely, which we know will actually help residents, will help pupils better. So tricky times. We've been working on Connect Somerset for just over 2 years now, and it's really there to bring together partners, have a different way of working. So it's not a new service, but a different way of working with our partners, with our communities locally. And there's been some really significant progress, which you'll see in the impact reports that we've brought for you today. So Laura will say more about this stuff, but I just wanted to pick out a few things. As Amelia was saying, neighbourhood working, it's been really critical. We've been working on that for 2 years. We're now at the point where we're starting to think of putting that sort of stuff in place, or we are putting it in place. We've got staff moving to those positions. That'll make a really big difference locally. Community hubs as well. We've identified about 170 places which residents use on a daily basis for support, and we can actually deliver some things through that. So that kind of neighbourhood working communities is a really key part of what we're trying to put in place. We've got some things like Help for All, which is really there to help increase the amount of early help that residents are accessing. Identifying who needs help. So we started off with NEETs, so children who are not in employment, education or training. We've got a successful model that actually nationally people are looking at whether they can roll that out because it works so well. So that's part of Transform, and it's delivered through that and using that data that we talked about earlier. And that data sharing and Transform Family View app is really making a big difference now. And being accessed by a lot of schools, maybe not quite all of them, but a lot of schools, and it really shows how we can work together, how we can share data, how we can have quite a different view of the child and family that's more holistic, and that enables us to put some very different solutions in place for the challenges that children face. There are also social care reforms, so central government has a Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill that's going through committees at the moment, I think, and that sets out quite a lot of different changes. Most of them I think we agree with, and will be really positive for the sector, but a really big change programme, which is principally around what you've been hearing about today, but about communities, about positioning our staff and services within neighbourhoods, about more early help, being able to support residents, and that predictive work, that kind of identifying who needs help early is really a critical part of that. And also there's a potential really for Connect Somerset to help be a kind of foundation for future council-wide transformation work as well, and we're really pleased about that. We did get the message about no death by PowerPoint, so the focus is very much on discussion, which is why Natasha and Laura are here as well. Got a few things to say in the just about the impact report, just as an introduction, but then we'll stop there and we won't go through the rest of the slides. You have obviously got the impact report, and you can ask particular questions. That neighbourhood implementation might be one thing you want to kind of test and sort of see where we're up to, and sort of continue from the conversation we had earlier with Amelia. Local impact, so what does it really feel like on the ground? What are the things which are changing? What's the potential here? What's going to happen? And then how can we be involved might be something that you want to ask about as well. But anyway, I'll pass over to Laura. I will try and put some slides on screen quickly, and then yeah, keep going. Yeah, I will.
Yes, sorry for members online. We're just having a little bit of a catch up as the system.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so thank you for inviting us along today. Really lovely to meet you all. Just want to touch on the next slide in terms of just reiterating what Connect Somerset is. It's really important to acknowledge that Connect Somerset is not a service, but it is a way of working. So very much kind of wrapped around practice and multi-agency working essentially. It's a partnership between Somerset Council, the NHS, including our acute hospitals, but also our community hospitals, as well as our primary care networks that are based within the communities. A really integral part of this partnership is through our voluntary community faith and social enterprise sector. As you know, we've got 12 champions that are formally kind of working as part of the programme, but our relationship with that sector is much wider than our 12 champions, and we're really keen to kind of continue that relationship and to build on it as well. And as well, another key partner within this space is our education colleagues, both in terms of early years settings right up through to secondary settings as well as colleges. The ultimate aim for Connect Somerset is around bolstering that early help capacity for all residents within Somerset. So it's not just focused on children and families, which I know is kind of the main conversation here in the room today, but we have also got that reach into adult services as well. And adult social care within the council are very much kind of committed and are part of the partnership through Connect Somerset as well. We have a couple of enablers, key kind of headlines in terms of neighbourhood working in our community hubs, which both Amelia and Richard have already touched on today, as well as kind of that digital and data transformation. And again, we've already touched on Transform and also some of the work that we're doing through our predictive analytics as well. Essentially, the whole thing is about connecting people. So how can we work better together as a whole and making sure that we are integrating our services wherever possible so that we can then deliver our services closer to home, which are then accessible to children and families. This is our impact report. We're really, really proud to share our impact report. It has twofold purpose to it. The first is to kind of acknowledge, to recognise the work that we've done across the partnership over the last year, and it's full of quantitative and qualitative reports within there. And it is something that we're very, very proud of and really keen to kind of get it pushed out as far as possible. So please share it on. That would be really great. The second fold for this is actually that education piece. Kind of what is the art of possible by working across different partnerships? How can we really tap into that community-led support? So we really hope that the impact report kind of gives that articulation as to kind of the art of the possible. What does community-led support look like? How empowering can it be for our communities and families and residents that we're supporting as well? And just to touch on a couple of kind of key headlines in terms of some of the data that's within that impact report. We've got just on the top left there is we've got our 12 champions that as we've touched on. Our 12 champions are engaged with 92% of schools within Somerset, and that's active engagement. So that's kind of, it's not just making contact and moving away. It's reoccurring active engagement. Schools are reaching out to us and champions daily, and our target there is to increase that percentage. We've then got just over 160,000 contacts made with residents and families through our household support fund. And that fund, as I think most of you are aware, is kind of targeted at that early help space in terms of supporting families that are in crisis. But most recently, there's been a little shift in terms of some of that prevention work as well. So we've been able to move some of that money upstream with the view that we are preventing issues from escalating and are able to then make sure that kind of those families are supported in the communities and are not then dependent on our statutory and acute services. We've then just got just over 950 million. Is that right? No, 950,000. That's gone out to kind of fund community hubs. And again, that's kind of supporting that bolstering that capacity at a really local level. We see our community hubs as a real key enablers. And so we're really keen to work in partnership with those hubs, and that money went initially just to support with kind of some of their running costs so that they can support families and residents through some of those hard winter resilience times. We've touched on Transform today already. We've got just over 1,300 users on Transform across the Early Help Partnership. A lot of those numbers are from our school settings, and we're really keen to kind of bolster those numbers and to continue to move those numbers up. Jill Baller, who kind of heads up the Transform portal, she's in regular contact with housing colleagues, police colleagues, etc., so that we continue to support them in accessing that platform and utilising it in a really meaningful way. And then just very quickly, I'll just touch on the one in the middle there is in terms of that relationship in our acute hospital space and the work that British Red Cross are doing and Community Council for Somerset in terms of supporting some of our older residents with a successful discharge so that we can get them home as quickly as possible and embedded in their community. And also then just kind of some of our digital offer in terms of our local offer just over 146,000 visitors to our local offer website, supporting families and self-serving, as well as our Connect Somerset website, which is more inward facing, and it is the toolbox essentially for our professionals that are working with families, with just over 35,000 professionals accessing that daily as well. So I will pause there.
I'm scribbling away lots of notes. Yeah. Oh. Okay, one moment. Is that it? We're good to go. Okay. I'll just introduce myself properly, really, because saying you're from an independent arts charity sounds a bit strange to be sitting in a space like this. But I'm the engagement director for a small hyperlocal charity in the centre of Yeovil. And my background is in education. I was an assistant head at a school here in Taunton for a very long time, actually. And one of my remits when I was in education was to link with business, community, voluntary organisation. And that came from a passion of using my subject, a creative subject, that allowed me in my curriculum to look outward. But as times got tougher, as we're discussing, situations change, schools do not have the capacity to lift their heads and look up and out. They want to, but they don't have that capacity. Stepping out of that arena and into a sector, voluntary charity, faith and social enterprise, is a sector I thought I understood as an educationalist, but when I stepped into it, I discovered a whole other world. So when approached to be a champion, it was a real privilege to be actually to go back into a space like education that I really do truly understand, and to be help my colleagues to look up and out. Some of the slides you've seen today have had those 5 letters VCFSE on them, and they are a very tiny part. But actually, when you unpick that sector, it is massive, as my colleague here is nodding. And there's a lot going on in that sector. And we're ready to partner. We're always ready to partner. We do not survive in that sector without collaboration. It just doesn't work, because we're always looking for funding. We're always looking for grants. If I give you a little scenario a snippet of my week this week, I am doing a talk with the Yeovil Environmental Forum. I'm meeting with the lead of that to do a presentation to them about how 22 local environmental charities, including representation from our town council, can better connect with schools. They want to go in and help. They want to use green space and growing as a way of connecting with young people that are struggling with their well-being, with their mental health. But they just send emails into schools and get no response. When I sit in a head teacher's briefing, or I sit in a locality meeting, you hear about what is out there and what alternative provision could we go to, where do we go to, because we've run out of resources. There has been no one connecting this. And I think the 12 champions feel that it's a real privilege to be able to be the bridge between these sectors. So the way I explain it when I have to go and meet a school, a head teacher, when I introduce myself to the Yeovil PCN, is that I am a connector of sectors, the voluntary, education and health sector, because our ethos is to wrap our services around children and families. And what Laura said about the Connect model is there is a transition between children and adult services that there's always been a bit of a struggle. So this one Connect Somerset allows us to look at the model of a family, and within that family you had adult and children's. So the voluntary sector does look at it as a whole like that. But it kind of, as a champion, it's really great to be able to go into those education sectors and be able to help them and guide them to what's out there. So I think that's why I was brought in today, because I do work very, very hyper locally. I am a very small charity. So, but within the champions, there's a variety of us that have worked in the health sector and the education sector for larger charities and smaller charities. So what we do is we meet twice a month and we're able to share good practice. We're able to kind of pilot things out. We're able to use some of our grant funding. We're able to open doors that we wouldn't have been able to open
because we're part of Connect Somerset and working with the council on this, which kind of is allowing us to try different pathways to offer other resources for schools.
Thank you.
Okay.
Picked your microphone and then gave it away to someone else. But Ruth, can I come to you?
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. I knew you were going to do that to me. Okay, so obviously I've been meeting with Laura and with Richard, and really looking at what this looks like. So I'm going to be absolutely honest, one of my biggest concerns when I started was the postcode lottery side of things. I probably did challenge Laura quite a bit on that, didn't I, Laura? But actually, I think it's fair to say that that hasn't been an issue that I've seen coming out from this. I think it's put us in a really good point for when that new bill does come out. Actually, we've got a really good grounding ready in Somerset to be able to implement the things that are coming forward. It's been really exciting, actually, being part of this and being able to see the work that's been happening. And I know we all keep going on about transforming the data, but I don't think you realise, unless you work in that sphere, what a big accomplishment that actually is to be able to pull that together and to get our data set so that we can actually have those conversations. I'm really fortunate in my work. I also get to work with some of the champions. So Rachel from my team has worked for you quite a lot. I'm also with the ones in Frome and the child area, and they are all really, really passionate about making a difference. And I think for me, one of the things that I love about this piece of work is that it's very solution focused. We often go into situations where we focus very much on the problem and everybody gets a bit bogged down by the finance and everything else that's going on, but actually these guys just look at it and go, okay, this is a problem, what can we do? And that's just a really refreshing change. So yeah, thank you to everyone that's been involved for all your work on this.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Just to remind you, do you remember a few meetings ago when I looked for volunteers from the committee to step up and get involved? Toby and Ruth this is the area they picked, and as you can tell, well, from Ruth, and I know Toby feels the same, that they've got a lot from it. So I wanted to thank you for stepping up and for being part of this committee. And again, the committee, we get out of this what we put in. So if any of you do have any spare time, please feel free to reach out one way or another. That's that bit. Ladies, thank you very much for taking the time to come along, and thank you for feeding into it. So while I allow my members to indicate they'd like to speak, I'll start off with a couple of questions just to get in with more of the bigger picture. We heard a lot about localities working earlier, and the way that works. We heard that the localities boundaries were set around the NHS areas, and that went through. So my question is, how is the Connect areas overlapping with the localities that we have, and how well are they working together?
Trying to find now what I'm presenting. That's the one. So if I move forward a little bit, this is one of the maps that shows that lineup. It's the same one as Amelia was showing earlier. So one of the things which is really apparent is that if we want to be a sustainable council in the future, we really need to be able to join up our services with health and with other colleagues as well. Health have a very determined, nationally determined geography, which is called primary care networks. And that's what most of those lines there set out on this map. So we made sure we're completely aligned with those primary care networks. The one slight discrepancy is that Taunton split between a north and a south with primary care networks, but they're thinking of joining that together anyway. So we're completely aligned. And then the boundaries which Amelia set out are then also completely aligned as well. And that's because the principle is we need our staff to really get to know each other well. We need them to know what's available in the community. And if you're working across the whole county, you're not going to know what's available locally that you can pull on and draw on. Or, actually you can phone up that person down the road, the police or health or pharmacy or whoever it is, to get that particular support for a family, for an older resident. So that's where we want to get to, is people get to know each other really well, able to work really closely together. We do have a geography around local community networks as well, and that geography is a bit different to this, but we see this as an operational geography. So putting in place the changes we need and I suppose the the services that we have, whereas local community networks much more about that engagement with communities, engagement with parishes, and working really closely there. All the champions go along to local community networks, and we work really closely with them. It's been invaluable in terms of pulling in that relationship with parishes and being able to draw on that as well.
Thank you. So another one from me then, the report, really great and really positive feedback. What next? Where does that report go? How does it feed into the bigger picture?
To Laura in a minute. So yeah, we're pleased with the report. Part of Connect Somerset, we think there are about 20 to 30,000 people working in this system. In early help. So not all of them know everything they need to know about Connect Somerset. Not all of them know, for instance, the principles which are put in the pack towards the end. And so we've got a really huge comms effort to engage, to work really closely with those 20 to 30,000. Because ultimately, if we want to be sustainable, we do need everyone to change and do something a little bit differently. So we work closely together. We're more efficient. We don't have referrals pinging around the system. We don't have single agency interventions when actually we're all working on the same outcomes, the same needs for a family. So we need to get past all those things and get a change in behaviours. So that engagement work's really important. So, a big part of that is telling people, look, be part of this. This is an identity we can all be part of and all embrace and work through Connect Somerset together. But Laura.
Yeah, so just to add, there is at the moment a comprehensive comms plan being produced, particularly around that education piece. So we're working with our internal comms team to do some members briefing. We've got Dragon's Pen, we've got the Loop that's in adult social care. So those pre-existing kind of distribution routes we're utilising internally. There is also conversations that's happening at the moment with our ICS colleagues as well as to how we get the impact report shared out there again for that education piece. We know that there is a collective of clinical directors that meets and they've got their own newsletter. So we are tapping into those health distribution lists as well. And I've also just recently picked up a conversation with Catherine Nolan in Spark Somerset in terms of how do we get that education piece out into the BCSE sector as well. So yeah, all of that's in hand. And as I said, please do share on. Because that'd be greatly appreciated.
I'm pleased to say you preempted one of my points about comms. One of the things that we're I think we're good and bad at, or good and not so good at in Somerset, is that we have lots of good things. We think we're promoting them, but we're not necessarily hitting the right people. And that's, to me, is an important element in this, in feeding it in. And I've written down, one of my points was, how do we promote the work of the hubs and build on that?
And just to touch on that, so I've kind of reflected on the electronic comms, but there's also those local conversations as well. So those neighbourhood meetings, we've talked about community breakfasts that are being hosted by the champions in partnership with school settings as well. So it's kind of those actual physical spaces as well, where we're going in, we're connecting with colleagues, we're connecting with children and families. It's that shared accountability or shared ownership that we all kind of need to share the impact report so that we can spread the message with the view that hopefully we can kind of spread that good work further in the future.
I'm just conscious that I'm not being inundated by members, but I'll just now we're being in, that's good. I'm being inundated by members now. I've been filling the gap, and members, please, when you would like to ask a question, raise your hand early so I can start getting the list again. Simon, Councillor Caswell.
Thank you, Councillor Redmond. I just wanted to pick up on the data. Probably being picky, but the wording is slightly different in two parts where you're celebrating. And you've got 163,072 households supported through the Household Support Fund. Now that seems an awfully big number considering the population of Somerset's about 550,000. So you're probably talking every household in Somerset, and you're probably talking 600 contacts per working day. So I was just wondering if you could just explain the figure.
Yeah, sure. We think there was some double counting, so we changed it to contacts on this slide rather than households. So it's a good spot. Well done. Laura, did you want to say just specifically what the data is describing?
Yeah, so this was taken from two separate rounds of the Household Support Fund. So there is a risk that there was that double counting. So we played it safe and changed the language in terms of contacts. So there will be some repeat contacts to the same families through the two rounds.
Thank you. Councillor Cravis. Oh, Nick, sorry, Nick O'Donnell.
Hi there, thank you. I was just going to ask about the NEAT targeted risk models. I was wondering how the new system's working. How do appropriate practitioners, how do they get a list of those in NEAT? And if that person is in NEAT, how do they know that they're on this list? How are they approached?
Yeah, good questions. It might take a few of us to answer all of that. And we'll talk again about transform. But effectively, there was an algorithm called Ronnie, so risk of NEAT indicator, that's used nationally across the country, and it's a bit out of date. So because it's certainly ethically accepted that you use algorithms to identify children who might be at risk of being not in employment, education or training, we thought this was a good starting point, and we had good data as well. So what we did was pull the data from Transform together into one place. So there's a data lake in Transform with about 1,000 bits of data from across those different systems that Amelia pointed out. And then we train algorithms on that data. So we say, look, this is the cohort that we're interested in, and it's quite a small cohort, so it's quite difficult to be able to identify, but using these techniques. But we trained it on that data. We had Edinburgh University having oversight of the project as well, and we've got our own PhD student, Charlotte, who leads on this. And so by training the data, you're able to identify which are the factors which link into that. This is quite a black box design, so it is AI, it's learning algorithms, which we're using to do that. So relatively new technology to apply in children's services. And then we're able to identify those children who may go on to be NEAT in the future. We think it's about twice as effective, but we still need to do more testing to find out that. If it's more effective, then that means that the staff who are engaging with those children are able to use their time better and have more impact as well. So what we then do is we take that data and we identify those children and we flag them in the Transform database, in the Transform Family View app rather. And so there's a page on NEATs. And on that page for a school, you'll see the list of children who may be at risk of becoming NEAT. And alongside that, we also work with Bath University, and there's kind of examples of what you can do, what support you can put in place, what works well in terms of engagement and support. And that's all on the same page in Transform. So you go in, you can see the children, you can see what support you ought to be giving. And it's for that school then to put that support in place and help that young person with their next steps in life. And hopefully reduce the chance of them becoming NEAT. Obviously, we need to work through the data and the impact around that as we go. But does anyone want to add more to that? Because it's got a bit of a kind of complicated thing. Amelia.
Thank you, Amelia.
Can I just come back?
2 seconds. Let Amelia finish up, and then you can.
I don't know, Chair, if this is something we'd like to look at in another meeting in more depth, because you'll be aware that that NEATs is a wicked issue. It's very, very complex. But what I would say is that, as well as the absolutely brilliant and very sophisticated work that Richard's team has put in place, you've got to have operational capacity to engage, because some of those risks are, as we said, multi-agency risks that a school or a college is not in a position to deal with on their own. So we do have a post-16 partnership that is really gripping this issue around colleges, very much being brought into that, as well as a wider partner, post-16 professionals. But we do now have in the virtual school a preparation for adulthood team. Somerset Works, you might have heard of in the past, was funded with funny money from the European Union. That's now properly mainstreamed as part of a core team going forward. And Careers and Pathways team is working very closely with them as well. That's also been kind of solidified in the structure. So it's really important that in this area, it's not just left to schools. There is so much that they can do, and the tool enables them to do that. But we do now have capacity to support and also to trigger some of those conversations that hasn't been there before.
Thank you.
So, I mean, when you say schools, I mean, I'm assuming now that every child has to stay in education until 17, we must be, and probably that must be coming up to 18 by now. The colleges, I mean, do you get raw data from the colleges? And because every college must know which other students have applied to university and which students haven't, and then do any of those colleges feed back to you saying, oh, this student hasn't applied to university, they didn't seem to have got a job? Do you get raw data from them as well?
I'll let Amelia come back, I think, that one.
So this is an absolute minefield, but I'm really, really pleased with the progress that we're making on it. So nationally, there has always been an enormous gap in that handover between schools and colleges. So the way that data, so we know exactly where those children are. In most cases, it's getting better while they're in that up to 16. That space between a secondary school and college is an absolute gulf because they have different systems, there are different expectations, the reporting nationally is completely different and much, much less. So in order for us to be able to keep track of children as they depart secondary school, we have to put in really quite comprehensive systems. We have brought that back to Somerset. So previously we contracted this in a Southwest arrangement. We didn't feel that was secure enough and we weren't getting the level of rigor. We have just contracted a new system and brought that in-house with a little bit of savings around the edge, which is great. But it's really important that we own the data and that we're having those conversations with our post-16 providers. Not everyone goes to college, not everyone goes to university, and we lose, as do nationally, a lot of children in that process every year. That number is coming down and down and down. It's been a huge success, but it is something that sounds incredibly simple and has been an absolute nightmare nationally for many, many years. But I'm really pleased we're starting to crack into that now and happy to go into more detail in a future meeting if that's of interest to the committee.
So thank you for that. So I think that has helped identify a number of points. One of the things I was looking to do for our forward work programme is include something along those lines in it, because as Amelia indicated, a number of the reporting timelines are set to cause they cause problems because there's forming a gap, and it's filling that gap and identifying young people at an earlier. So we'll take that and bring it forward, because one of the things that I was looking to do going forward is find a way to have some data dashboards there. The Corporate Parent Board has some really interesting data that's reported on a regular basis that we can timeline, and we as this committee, I think, missing out on that. So that's something that we're looking. So Nick, thank you for that. Evie.
I just wanted to say massive thank you. I know Ruth came in and said that it's like postcode lottery. Well, actually, with Natasha for Yeovil as one of our champions, it is like we've won the lottery, to be honest with you. Because when we're sat in these meetings, I can guarantee you've done breakfast meetings, LCNs, I don't know, crime commissioners coming in, and being able to connect with that one person. And I have pushed a couple of times when I hear a feeding back on officers and stuff. They're all questions I was going to ask, but I'm able to get that from somebody else that's doing a lot of the hard work. And Natasha and I are both really keen not to reinvent the wheel. So a lot of these things of connecting people is building them and making them stronger. And I think this work that's gone on here, it is amazing. So thank you very much. For me as a councillor, you've saved me hours of questions and work, and I can see the transformation that's happening within our area. Thank you.
Yeah, and I was one of the things that I've got no more questions. I don't think. Okay, so one of the things that I was going to say is obviously this is the work has been really good, and lots of benefits there. And one thing I will say is I would suggest that to from this meeting go back to your change coordinators and say to them, make contact again with your local councillor if you haven't already done so, because you now have evidence of how beneficial it is. And I'm very conscious that there's only a small proportion of my colleagues that are aware of the good work that's being done by the Connect Somerset team. And if you need to, if they're having problems connecting, then please tell your team to escalate it back to some of us here or yourself to feed in, because I think that we've talked about tell local councillors, and I know that your team have reached out to most of them, and it's there's a failure in getting back. But I think with this report and the benefits that the team are doing, and particularly moving forward with the changes that are being made in children's services around localities. Now would be a good time to knock on councillors' doors, because they need to be aware of this. I think it's really important that they are made so. Okay. Thank you, ladies. I'm sorry you went inundated with questions, but I really do appreciate that. This is, well, for me, it's been really helpful. I know for colleagues around the table, your time has been well spent raising the profile. So thank you for that. Thank you, Richard, for that, and thank you, members. Okay, moving on then very quickly. Then item 11 of our agenda is information circulated between items that for comment and any points or responses in relation to that. Okay, no other business. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Please reply to the workshop invite so that we know how many people are coming. Please feed into me or anyone else anything you would like covered in the workshop. As I say, I'm going to be reaching out to senior leaders so that we can link up to make sure that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet when we get to the workshop. Thank you much for your time. Meeting closed.